I'm Veronica Nyan-Jones with IFC. Welcome back to the Sustainability Exchange. We're so thrilled to have you with us. We hope everyone will log into the platform so that you can experience all of the different interactive elements we've tried out for you this year. You can go into the virtual reality gallery and experience other countries. You can download the Sustainability Exchange playlist that you've all contributed to. We also have special networking called Wander, where you can go to the beach and all of a sudden your video camera will pop up and you can chat with somebody and make a new friend. I know this has been a really difficult, very isolating, lonely year, and for many of us it still is. And so we want to create a kind of community watching and experiencing the exchange together. So I invited a couple of friends to come over and watch with me. And if you're watching alone, please come and watch with us. Come on. Ladies, thank you so much for coming so we can watch this together. It's so much more special with you here. Thank you.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having us.
Infrastructure. It is all around us and impacts our lives every day. It is the clean drinking water in our homes, the energy that powers our schools and hospitals, the transport that moves us around our neighborhoods. Infrastructure can also be invisible.
There's the digital infrastructure, which is mostly unseen. So until we lose communication or we have to switch off our phones, then we realize how much the digital infrastructure is actually core to our everyday lives.
By 2030, there will be $90 trillion in spending on infrastructure around the world to keep our communities and businesses thriving. But we have some critical choices to make to ensure we design infrastructure that meets everyone's needs. As we fight climate change, we need low-carbon infrastructure that can deliver net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. It must also be resilient to withstand extreme climate events. It needs to provide fair access to educational, digital, economic, and healthcare opportunities. At the very heart of our infrastructure plans should be people and the planet. Here are some examples we can learn from. Renewables company Lekela has spent the last 5 years delivering clean power to African countries through wind and solar projects, while creating value for communities too.
We've been working with the IFC through a pilot program they're doing called Energy to Equal. This program is looking to work with renewable energy companies across sub-Saharan Africa to promote women participation in the renewable space. We're not just there to do the megawatts, we're also there really to be part of that community's development story.
In Bogota, the Transmicable gondola and bus system has reduced the commute time of citizens from one of the poorest areas by 80%. Giving them more time to spend with their families.
Pues sí, era muy difícil, a veces me echaba hasta una hora. Ahora con el Transmicable es más fácil el acceso para las personas en silla de ruedas, tiene prioridad, nos facilita un poco más lo que es la vida para nosotros.
Around the world, more than 2 billion people can't access clean drinking water, and more than 4 billion lack safely managed sanitation. In Chennai, the water tech firm Wabag is cleaning and protecting the Ganges River. By reducing the discharge of untreated sewage, it's dramatically improved local communities' access to clean water. Those pioneering projects provide more people with clean energy, water, and affordable mobility, while reducing greenhouse gas emissions that drive the climate crisis. Women street vendors in Rwanda worked with the UN to design the Safe Mini Market. Now they can safely trade their goods instead of facing sexual harassment, violence, and theft that they often experience selling on the street. By involving women in the design and implementation of infrastructure, these projects have increased the well-being of the women and the wider community.
That's the only way that it will really be sustainable, that we'll be able to make sustainable changes in our livelihoods, sustainable changes in our energy system, if we bring along people with that. We make people understand that there can be a better world here.
We have a shared responsibility and common goal across government, the private sector, and civil society to create infrastructure that works for everyone and builds a better world. 3 principles can help us get there. Ensure community-focused design. Infrastructure development should be community-driven. to make sure that local needs are the focus of investments. A participatory design process, including local people's voices and choices, should steer how infrastructure projects are designed and built. Ensure equitable access. Infrastructure should be open to everyone, accommodating a wide range of individual preferences and abilities, regardless of their economic, social, or cultural status and identity. Finally, infrastructure should have positive impact. It should be low carbon, resilient, and generate tangible benefits for everyone in the community. With $90 trillion to spend in the next 10 years and a net zero goal to reach by 2050, applying best practice to infrastructure has never been more important. Together we can improve accessibility and equity while creating a low-carbon, resilient, and inclusive economy. A society where no one is left behind.
We build trust.
We build trust.
We build trust
by listening to those most affected
and telling them their voice matters.
Pour créer une relation de confiance.
The world needs leaders who provide protection for their people.
We build trust.
We build trust.
Being transparent.
To build smarter and greener cities.
Leading by example.
We build trust by creating more diverse and interactive spaces.
By suspending judgment.
Rien ne peut se faire pour les femmes sans les femmes.
We build trust through integrity.
We build trust
to help improve digital transformation.
Supporting the mental and emotional well-being of the people who live in the cities.
харилцаа, ойлголцол, итгэлцэл. Энэ гурав бол салшгүй зүйл.
Keeping cities moving, building inclusive and equitable workplaces.
Really listening and learning from people's diverse views.
By not shying away from the tough questions.
By being curious and vulnerable.
To use digital for better lives.
We build trust by engaging everybody.
Welcome to the IFC Sustainability Exchange. I passed the phone to a girl who loves to sing, but I wish she spent more time on homework.
I'm passing the phone to a Nintendo sailboat wizard and someone very good at math.
I am passing the phone to someone who works with farmers but also likes bungee jumping.
I'm passing the phone to someone who used to race motorcycles and now design luxury hotels.
I'm passing the phone to someone who always makes honor roll and is scared of butterflies.
I am passing the phone to a woman who hosted salsa dancing in her dorm and now works with women in STEM in 22 different countries.
I'm passing the phone to someone who has trained as an actor in Romania and who is now a master computer programmer.
I passed the phone to a geophysicist who helps the communities benefit from infrastructure projects.
I passed the phone to someone who wants to be a ballerina, gymnast, astronaut when she grows up.
I'm passing the phone to a gardener who helps women entrepreneurs in Kenya.
I'm passing the phone to a Nigerian refugee who just became the US chess master.
I'm passing the phone to a man who loves jazz and just became the first African managing director of IFC.
Thank you so much, Tani, and welcome everyone to the 2021 IFC Sustainability Exchange. I am thrilled to host Don Cheadle, the world-renowned actor, director, author, and activist to discuss climate justice and the role of art in development. My family is coming from Saint Louis in Senegal, which was an important historical point, I think UNESCO heritage, and the coast there has been totally devastated. And as a consequence, people are getting in boats and going to Europe and dying in the sea. And I see people also migrating from wherever they are to be able to get a better living. So for me, it's about human being living today and about our children and about our present.
Absolutely. And I think what you're speaking about specifically about how it impacts, again, the most vulnerable among us, and how people with means, people with money, to a degree, will be able to insulate themselves somewhat. But those that are living at the fringes, and those people who are, coming up against it, subsistence farmers, people who live off of the sea, not for sales, but actually to survive, are the ones that are going to be most greatly impacted. Something else that we observed in Sudan, in Darfur, how that was directly underpinning the conflict, the inability for people to obtain the resources, water, firewood, women having to leave their villages and then putting themselves at risk because they moved into areas where they were then vulnerable. That's the other issue that we don't talk about, how the people that are most impacted by it are the least created, the ones that created the problem the least. So it's really about justice in every way that we talk about it, it seems to me.
But Don, you made a very, very powerful point. Just one day, I was talking to our team. We're talking about CO2 emission and emissions. When we look at the energy in sub-Saharan Africa, we exclude South Africa. In fact, the emissions coming from energy produced in Africa is 3% of the world emissions, 3%. And look at the impact of climate change on the living condition of people. So the injustice that you're talking there is obvious there. People who are producing basically no CO2 who are suffering the most of the consequence of emissions. We are talking about e-vehicles in more and more in OECD countries, in large countries, how to green all this. But at the same time, people are exporting old cars in South Asia and in Africa. So the polluted car are sent to the poorest country, right. And why people are very happy to green their transportation in the richest country.
And we need to have those people who are most affected egregiously by this be a part of the solutions and be a part of letting people know exactly what and how they need it. So that it is not, again, something that's sort of a top-down approach, but something where we're reaching toward the people to say, and how can we specifically, based on your experiences, based on your specific needs, bring you into the fold and not just be dictating what it is that you need. And I think that's important for all organizations to think about that the people that we're professing to help need to be at the table to explain to them to how to be helped.
Don, you're so right. I think that sustainable development, sustainable from an environmental standpoint, but sustainable in time, is when people are involved. The lesson of last year, what happened in this country and other places in the world, was a big awakening for all of us. That there is some racial injustice we cannot continue forever. At some point there is something which will happen, which may make people wake up and say, mm-mm.
I think it's also very important that we are clear that it's one thing to talk about individual responsibility, but I think that often that we focus on that much more than we focus on the responsibility of corporations. That when we're talking about relative to the pollution and relative to the negative effects that are impacting the environment, they're much more heavy on the side of the corporations and much more heavy on the side of people who are making billions and billions of dollars off of these practices than they are about individuals who drive a gas car or neglect to do the best in recycling.
We need to make sure that we don't ask the same to the person who is trying to make a living every day, hardly to things that someone who is in a totally different situation. It's the same with countries also.
Yes.
Countries who have to feed their people, who have to, we need to listen to what they're saying. We need to be very attentive. When people are telling you, listen, 20% of my population have access to electricity. So what do you want me to do? We have to listen to that. We have to solve that problem. But the beauty is that with technology and advancement today, there is a possibility of doing it in a way which is sustainable. I don't see a big change in the recent history where art didn't play a role.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say art / storytelling. To me, those are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Not only are they not mutually exclusive, they go hand in hand. So it's how to make sure that the art that we are creating is speaking, to the nerve of the issue without, again, being too soapbox, but being something that invites in, and sometimes being confrontational in your face. I mean, any way that you have to get to these results, we have to get to them.
Leaders like you are great, and for me, being able to work with you on this agenda will be a tremendous honor, because I think that the ability you have to bring people around. I was just when I was getting ready to come here, and I said to my son, I'm going to talk to you. He was so excited. I will never get that excitement for him myself. So it just so the power that you have to bring that generation with shaping the future to be able to embrace the movement that you are leading, you and other great leaders.
Well, thank you. I'm humbled by what you say. I don't feel about myself in that way, but I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Let's go back to Rwanda. If the Rwandan people didn't force everybody to have an obligation of memory of what happened, have the memorials that you visited there, all these activities, I'm not sure that it would have been remain as much in people's memory. When you think about the Darfur, people are interested at some point after, they move to something else. So I think that I don't want you to underestimate the inspiration and how. And you and I, we love jazz. I mean, Strange Fruits was just a song. But look at, I grew up in Senegal. I'm from Senegal. Strange Fruits means something to me. Okay? When Marcus Miller plays tutu or something like that, people say, yeah. A lot of kids start listening to what Desmond Tutu was saying. And you have a ton of examples. Art is a powerful tools to do that. If I think about what has been done in the fight against apartheid, if we didn't have Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, Dudu Pukwana, all these great artists, Ibrahim, Abdullah Ibrahim, us who were young students at that time,
And the students, yes, I'm glad you said it. That's it, because it's always the young people. I mean, it's always, and I think we can point to examples over and over again. You spoke about South Africa, obviously. Think about the movement that just happened in our country in the last year. It's always the young people who not only have the energy, but are the ones who have the passion and are often the ones who have more information and are plugged in a way that some of us are not. So absolutely supporting the youth and making sure that they, who will be most affected by this as future rolls on, that they have a seat at the table and that they have a voice. That's incredibly important.
My son will listen to you, but no more than he will listen to me.
We're always trying to find somebody for our kids to listen to that won't listen to us. It's like, well, if he says it, will you do it? That's hilarious. Yep. I'm always trying to figure out ways to smuggle these messages in, so to speak, to get people nodding their heads and then they leave later and go, wait a minute, did I just learn something? Or was I just inspired and I didn't even know it? So I think it's important to do both, because I think if things become too preachy, if something feels like it's proselytizing, I think people want to reject it or fold their arms. And that's why I think music is so great and art is so great, because it's disarming, because it has the exact opposite effect. It has the ability to get in and get past your defenses and get you in your feelings in a good way and kind of out of your head. And I think that's what we need. I think people need to be sensitized to these issues, and specifically to climate change. What's more important than trying to make sure that we can all survive on this planet?
Don, on the continent, you don't know how popular you are.
No, I don't. But
Yeah.
but I'm glad you tell. But great.
Kids in Africa knows you, your face. They love you. I mean, you just talking to them about something will mean so much to so many young kids in Africa.
So I would just like to say I appreciate you. I appreciate the IFC. I appreciate anyone who's throwing in to try to get us to the result that we need to get to. And let's just keep cracking. Let's just keep cracking, Mokhtar. We got to do it, right?
Don, really, I'm humbled really to have that conversation with you. And I know that you are busy doing a ton of things. And the fact that you made an important and essential part of your life or time to address those issues that are far from lots of people's eyes, Darfur, what is other part of the world, is for me powerful. And if you want to look at your circle of people, you can consider me as part of that circle at large of people. Would be very happy to contribute.
All the voices, we need all of them. Thank you very much, Mokhtar.
Thank you so much, Don.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be with you and share my story with you. I'm Nyarwach. I'm from South Sudan, and I'm the voice of the voiceless. So when the war occurred in South Sudan, I just flew to Kakuma refugee in Kenya. Galwag is the name of my first love. I met Galwag in Juba, and before war, I keep calling Galwag, and Galwag was not picking up my call, and that was the time I was so upset and created the song. I didn't know that Galwag video will be made in Kakuma, because I lose hope, because when there's no Galwag and everything opportunity, there's no opportunity, because they're in Kakuma, people cannot sing because nobody will come for your show, because everybody is just down, there's no job. Music gives my community happiness and strength, and also music, it makes them to forget the hard situation that we are in now. I want advice to go to all leaders to give chance to young girls to go for education and not to force them to get married or rape them, because raping is the weapon that is killing our Africa. Technology helped me a lot to express my music so that everybody can see me all over the world.
Wow. What did you think, Kev?
Oh, I mean, Dawn and Mokhtar put their finger on the pulse of the critical climate issues, but for me, Nairaj is raw, she's real, and she's resilient. And if every woman, girl, and disempowered person on this planet had her strength, we'd be in a really different place.
I am so moved, I'm speechless. I myself am from Sudan, and
absolutely, her resilience is beautiful, and I can't help but be amazed by the power of music and art bringing us all together as human beings.
So speaking of powerful artists, we are going to take you now to check in with 3 more artists we have visiting us today. We have teams in Mongolia, in Ghana, and Colombia, and they are all creating something special and unique just for you. So let's go check it out and meet them.
The biggest challenge concerning it, you're just going to spend only 24 hours to work on it. That's the biggest challenge.
Es un barrio que se caracteriza por eso, por ser fuerte con los temas artísticos y culturales.
La idea es transformar, como la palabra lo dice en el boceto.
All right, Vade, so now I can tell you how excited I was about this conversation. Actually, you know, my son is a big gamer and is getting his undergraduate degree in game design.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really glad to speak with you as well. We actually hired a team of 12 students from a gaming department, like your son's at, as part of this project, NemoNet. So yeah, definitely lots of career opportunities for him.
Good. Well, let me actually take a step back and welcome you. I'm here today with Dr. Vade Turayath, who has an incredibly illustrious career thus far. So how did you follow that trajectory?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's honestly, I think I knew I wanted to work at NASA since I was about 4, which I guess a lot of kids don't necessarily have that kind of follow through or resolve. But for me, it was getting to see the Mars Pathfinder rover come in, and I decided to go study in Russia for 4.5 years, theoretical physics and astrophysics. It was a cost-saving measure, but also it was really exciting to live in a different country, to learn the language. And I transferred to Stanford, where I finished my bachelor's degree in physics, and then I got accepted into the master's and then PhD program in aeronautics and astronautics. And it was around that time I kind of pivoted from doing astronomy, astrophysics, really big picture questions about cosmology to, okay, how do we improve things on Earth? Back then we had mapped about 4% of the ocean floor, even though it covers 70% of our planet, and we've actually mapped all of Mars and the moon at a spatial resolution of 30 meters or finer, but the ocean is just this big unknown. So I did my PhD in a technology called fluid lensing, and that eventually got me hired at NASA, and I got funding to develop that instrument, and now it's mapping the ocean and coral reefs around the world.
Why is it that people haven't paid enough attention to the ocean? It is so important for the sustainability of the planet.
So I think the challenge with ocean science is, one, it's hard. It's a lot harder to send things down to the bottom of the ocean than it is to even send them into low Earth orbit. One of my mentors, Dr. Sylvia Earle, we call her deepness because she's been down to one of the deepest spots in the ocean. She points out that there are more people who have walked on the moon than have actually been down to the bottom of the ocean floor.
Well, Vade, I want to come back to NemoNet because I think there's a new species emerging amongst humans. They're called gamers. And they certainly live a very different life than I did in my generation, at any rate. But your NemoNet project really was a call out to gamers and a call for NASA to use open source technology to solve some of these problems. Whose idea was it? How's it working? Are you finding that these young gamers are a different species?
They are. I mean, they're certainly surprising me. So when I started NemoNet, we had this amazing technology, fluid lensing, that could map coral reefs at the sub-centimeter scale in 3D. We were mapping islands around the world, and we had these huge data sets, and there wasn't really a quick way to classify all of that data into questions like, okay, where's the coral? How is it changing over time? What species are present? So we proposed a project to NASA headquarters called NemoNet, and the idea was to take all of this high-resolution 3D data we had from FluidCam instrument, as well as another instrument called MIDAR, and use it to crowdsource the classification of coral reefs in 3D. We didn't pitch it as a video game at first. It was just a machine learning tool, a convolutional neural network running on our supercomputer. And it was basically in what we call an advanced information systems technology project. And we snuck in the video game element because we knew that we wanted to engage people. So in NemoNet, we created a system where users have to, incrementally learn about corals and pass tests. So they classify and paint in 3D, and as they're doing so, they get to see how accurate they are. We've developed a product that produces an accuracy that is way beyond that of professional annotators. So our top player is 11 years old, and he beats me. Wow. He's outranked me as the principal investigator on the project. His accuracy is just so consistent and reliable. So I think it taps into this untapped potential of humans, in that there's so much intelligence out there, and some of it's just looking for a diversion, something that takes them out of, the COVID pandemic or something else, and gets them into a world where they can explore, create, and contribute meaningfully to science.
I know that in addition to being an incredible scientist and technologist, you've been recognized by NASA for your engagement with equal employment opportunity models and supporting the LGBT community. So can you talk a little bit about that experience and what brought you to think about diversity and inclusion in the workplace?
Sure. So I mean, I'll be blunt. People like me, people who look like me, people who have my sexual orientation, we're very rare, rarely encountered in my field, in ocean sciences at NASA. And for me, the minute I got hired at NASA, it was almost like a responsibility to pay it forward to the next group of people. And the only way in which you can really create lasting change is if you spend the time. I spend about 20% of my job doing issues related to diversity and inclusion, because I just think I would not be here if it were not for previous generations taking that time and that sacrifice to do it.
So Vade, how do we get the younger generation more interested in the sciences and a more diverse set of students studying biology, chemistry, technology?
One, yes, having role models at all levels is key, because people do look up to them, and they do sort of envision how well they'll fit into an environment based upon the presence or lack thereof of what they might look like. The second is just education, making sure that we have those resources for kids, especially in kids who are coming from communities where there's a lot of poverty, a lot of violence. And then finally at on the professional stage, I see a lot of people, particularly women in my field, will drop out of the sort of academic tenure line right after they finish their PhD, and you're entering the world of looking for a job, getting hired. That can be really intimidating, and having a mentor that's kind of cheering you on, saying, look, you may fail a few times, but eventually you will succeed, is really key in breaking through. And I'm hoping I hope that answers your question.
No, you did. Vade, we could keep talking forever, but I know that we're out of time. I want to thank you for the conversation. It was deep and rich, and it could have gone many different directions, but I hope that we can find a way to work together someday. So thank you again for your time.
My pleasure, Stephanie. It was such a wonderful opportunity.
My name is Reynold Mangundu and I live in Namibia, Sub-Saharan Africa. I've dedicated my life and professional career supporting and leading sustainability transitions. In 2016, I fell in love with gaming, and ever since I've hosted various games with many young people, sharing laughter, having conversations. It allows us to really connect in ways that really matters, because we live in a very fragmented world. And for that reason, I started the Sustainability Games as sort of a platform to promote cultural transformation. Where policymakers, students, young professionals, and learners come together.
It's a fun and interactive way that people can learn in a very casual way.
SDG Games showed me that we can teach in different ways, and the ways that are maybe more engaging than these traditional methods of teaching.
SDG Games have generated awareness on environmental challenges based on a local and international level.
We need a new way of thinking and doing things beyond business as usual. Gaming for me has become this powerful tool. They have the power to promote cultural transformation around the world.
Marcus, very great to have you here today. So jumping right into it, I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. You started Bolt when you were 19 years old. 8 years later, you are the youngest founder of $1 billion company in Europe. What motivated you to start the company at such a young age? And what helped you overcome the lack of experience?
Great question. I think that it started really when I was probably 5-6 years old, and I was realizing that technology is probably the best way for an individual to make an impact on the world. So for a long time, I was thinking of becoming a scientist. But then in the early 2000s, Skype was born, and it very quickly grew into the largest European technology startup. And my older brother was very lucky to be one of the early employees there. So I saw as a kid how you can come from a small country like Estonia and really change the world using technology and being an entrepreneur. I was really looking forward to starting a company myself as soon as I could. And then when I was in the last year of high school, I felt I was finally ready, and then I really put all my effort into starting Bolt. And now 8 years later, we're here. The company is now having more than 2,000 employees across 40 countries, and we have more than 50 million customers on the platform. So I've never looked back since then.
So with Bolt, you've managed to disrupt the ride-sharing space, and you've become a #1 travel app in quite a number of countries. And I think to name a couple, Kenya and Nigeria come to mind. And as we know, rides are a means to an end for everyone, doesn't matter who you are. So where are you trying to get to in terms of your business journey, and what legacy are you trying to leave behind?
It's actually something I think about a lot, and we're trying to build a company that can have a lasting impact for decades. It's not something that we would want to build for a few years and then quickly exit and then sell off the business, but rather the complete opposite of that. So we're on a long journey, and how we look at our mission is to build a better way for people to move in cities, which is that today, especially in the developed world, people are completely forced to buy a car. And we're trying to avoid that future from happening in the more developing markets so they can actually leapfrog that system. We're starting off with ride-hailing. We see that's the best place to start in most of the cities and countries we're in. But then over time, we're looking to add other services to that platform. So, for example, we're the largest electric scooter operator in Europe now, with more than 100,000 light electric scooters. And we're just actually a couple of weeks ago, we were launching Bolt Drive, which is our first car sharing service where people can just rent a car for example, for weekend trips. They don't need to buy a car. And we're looking at what other services we can offer to really make it so that people don't need to get locked into car ownership and they get access to convenient, safe and affordable transportation exactly when they need it. In the context of Bolt, how we think about it is that transportation is a very basic human need. If people can't go where they need to go, they can't access education, work, basic necessities. So really, it's one of the core building blocks of a society and a city to work. And we hope to make our small part in that, which is to make it so that actually everybody could access the service. And luckily, we see that the barriers to entry to that are coming down over the years. Smartphone is getting more accessible, internet is getting more accessible, but the prices of transportation are still very high.
One of my favorite questions to ask young people like you and self-starters and entrepreneurs like you, you're a huge advocate of young entrepreneurs and you're serving as a coach and a supporter of young people that are also trying to make it out there. So your experience is obviously, starting at a young age, building this massive global company. I just wanted to understand what advice would you give to other people out there, young people especially, that are starting out and trying to build their own little empire. What would you say to them based on your personal experience and your personal journey?
Probably the one that is the most important is that it all comes down to your personal psychology and motivation, which is that really starting any startup is very hard, and especially one that grows as quickly as Bolt has grown. So you really need to have a strong reason for why you're doing it in the first place. Because I often see that people are starting nowadays companies for the wrong reasons. And if you're just in it for the financial gain, there's probably many other avenues for people to pursue. But entrepreneurship is really, really tough. When we look at really the best performing people we've had in the company, they generally have almost no industry experience whatsoever. But what they do have is a lot of drive. They really want to get things done. They're super passionate about what we're doing as a company. They're really quick learners. And oftentimes they end up running circles around these industry veterans who come in thinking they already know everything and who don't put in nearly the same effort. The second bigger lesson I have is that it makes sense to trust yourself. Because what I've seen over the years is that it's always great to get advice from older mentors, but they never understand the full context as well as you do yourself. I do think games have a very important part to play in our lives. Specifically, I've been always a big fan of real-time strategy games. I'm actually probably playing too much of them even now, but really I think it's something that can really develop your thinking in many ways, depending on what kind of a game it is, not to mention just cheer people up and create a strong sense of community. So I think they definitely have a growing role for people over the next years.
Fantastic. Really, thank you so much. Again, Marcus, it was such a pleasure having a chat with you.
Thank you for having me.
I am 10 years old. I won the New York State Chess Championship for my age group in 2019. And recently, on May 1st, I became a national chess master. Chess is basically life. If you make one wrong decision, you could lose the game. Chess is basically thinking about what you're going to move, like thinking in life, what's your next step? I didn't have anything else to do. I didn't have sports. Chess was the only thing I had. So I was like, why not go for it? You have to put in a lot of focus on the game, and you have to put your heart to it. You need to know how the pieces move, how the pieces can move, and basic patterns in the game.
If you were a chess piece, what chess piece would you be?
A knight. It can move in an L shape, it can fork, it can check the king, it can do a lot of things. It's very tricky, so watch out for the knight. I would want to become a pilot. I like to travel a lot. Whenever I get in the airplane, I'm like the most excited. I really like to be in the sky.
Tani, your story is truly inspiring. From Nigeria to the US, you remind us that games play an important role in our learning and can help us stay motivated to think about what is our best next move. Taniqua, so with this in mind, what's our next move?
Michelle, where in the world could you walk into a room and find an accessibility architect, a digital advisor to the Pope, a top physics student, and a Buddhist nun?
Probably it sounds like a crowd that we could find right here at the Exchange.
You're right. We'll be looking at multiple dimensions of wellness, from AI for accessibility to workplace design, and the intersection of knowledge, data, and values. What's your view? Use hashtag IFC Exchange and share on social media or comment in the chat.
Let's kind of, I guess, go back to basics for our audience and for the lay people out there. AI for accessibility. Where are we with this field, and kind of what's happening now and what needs to happen next, in your opinion?
What we've found over the last 3 years is that there's a significant lack of data. There's a real data desert, and you can't do AI without data. So we've invested significantly in creating data sets or helping to make sure that existing data sets are inclusive, right? I think that was one of the biggest learnings that we saw with seeing AI, is that you can have a huge data set of images that are photographs taken by people with vision. And then when you try to build models on that will to be used by people who are blind to recognize things in their environment, it's not going to work. It's not surprising. I mean, I've been in this space for over 22 years working to make the world more equitable. And because the world is not equitable, our data is not equitable. And so it's been really surprising that that's been one of the places we've had to spend so much of our time. That said, it's super exciting how AI, like the opportunities we have with AI to empower people, because we also don't want AI to be making decisions for people. We want AI to help people make better decisions.
One of the challenges, as you know, around data, especially for more marginalized communities, is around trust. It would be great to hear your thoughts about how we even start to unpick trust.
And I think the only way that we really build trust is that we build with people, not for people. And so that's also, we're co-designing, therefore we're really listening and we're really including everyone. I think that's what I'm super excited about with design justice, is that the 3 questions to ask are: who benefits from this system, who's potentially harmed from this system, and who participates in building it. And I feel like if those 3 questions are honestly asked and acted on, I think the result is something that is more trustworthy.
I just Wonder whether you had some thoughts around the power of AI to solve some of these healthcare issues, whether you're seeing some healthcare solutions kind of coming through the work that you're doing, and what you think the opportunities are to kind of drive inclusive AI into healthcare.
Some of the biggest issues I'm seeing, as you mentioned, are just the access, right? And I think especially with mental health care, I myself live with a mental health condition. I have PTSD, and so my feelers are very wide on that area in particular. I know a lot of people who were not able to get mental health care, the mental health care they needed. And that's one of the biggest impacts, side effects of the pandemic is, there's also a huge mental health crisis. The other issue is just the access to the information. Many of my friends who are blind and deaf, a lot of that information is not accessible. A lot of those websites are not accessible. And that's another appalling thing, that when you look at the statistics, 97% of the top 1 million websites still have significant accessibility issues. And we just celebrated the 22nd anniversary of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 1.0. I do think there is help that AI can do in making websites more accessible. That is something that I'm excited about and investing in. But some of those basic infrastructure pieces is not something that AI is going to fix, unfortunately. I wish it were.
Call to action to everybody else that's out there that's looking at infrastructure to get on this and get it sorted.
Father Luca, you are working to set up the Italian Center for Artificial Intelligence here in Turin. The question is spontaneous. Why a priest?
That's a good question, and a lot of people make the same question to me. The human being wants to be like God. For the Church, this is possible, but only if I agree to do it with God. And if I want to do it as God has chosen to do it. That is for love and with love, and not for power and to manage power balance. Today, technology is a computational power, and it could be computational service for all and with all. Ariana, you just graduated in physics with a very good vocation, and you founded with your colleagues the Machine Learning Journal Club. What do you do, and how do you young people see the digital future of the world?
The aim of our association is to make accessible the resource that artificial intelligence gives to a wider range of people. And for this reason, we produce open source materials and code that everyone can access freely. I believe that there is a misunderstanding about what artificial intelligence really is, an understandable one given by the media. Technology itself isn't the solution to every problem, but it is certainly a part of it. A technological solution is just a solution for one single problem, not every problem. So, Father Luca, how do you wish the digital future of the world?
I wish a future for you, for other people, for Cristina and Nicolò, my nephew. A future where knowledge goes always together with values. I wish that the technology is not a race to the strongest, but helping the weakest. Because the weakest, sooner or later, will be me. A technology that does not have the man at the center, but the human being as its crucial aim. Thank you.
From Turin.
Listening us, we are at Pompeii Lab, a special site for students and older people matching together for a better life.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Kuzampo, I'm Aninam Gilamo from Bhutan. And once we are born in this samsara, we have to face a lot of suffering. The suffering will be in both the form, invisible and visible. So by this pandemic, I'm sure everyone is facing a lot of problem and suffering. And I would like to say, please don't lose your hope. Keep yourself very strong. Be optimistic. And keeping yourself strong and faith on the one whom you trust will overcome the suffering. And I want to pray a small prayer for the one who have lost their life, one who's in suffering, and one who are going to face the suffering. So please join for the prayers together. Changchu semchu rinpoche make panam kenjurchi kewa nyampa mepa gongne gondo palwarsho kadinche la.
The conversation was really interesting between the fresh graduate and the priest. I thought that was a really nice combination.
I really love Wendy's design justice concept. She defined it very well, that access to data, access to information, access to technology has to be equal for everybody.
I love that. I have not heard that term before, but now I'm going to use it all the time.
I know.
Design justice. Because the whole point is to have everybody at the table, right? It doesn't matter what the intention is. If you don't have everybody at the table in the design process, then it can never be as good to serve everyone.
No, absolutely.
Actually, now we get to hear from 3 civil society leaders. You're going to get divided up, so you get to choose who you go listen to. And they're going to tell you what they've learned through COVID, what they're hoping to keep going into the future. And then after you hear from them, we'll be right back together. So click on one of those buttons, choose your favorite, and we'll see you soon.
Well, a challenge for climate in terms of COVID and our recovery is that we go back to business as usual. I mean, we know that COVID has changed a lot of our habits, our commuting habits, our traveling habits, how we use energy, et cetera. And that all of that has declined and it's impacted the climate very positively. But the question for us, the challenge for us, and it's both the challenge and the opportunity, is can we go back? Can we build back better? Can we build back greener? Can we build back in a different way? I think a lot of the technologies are out there. It's just getting them to a place where they are price competitive to fossil fuel technologies. For example, hydrogen, green hydrogen, it has potential to really help in some of the long haul transit and some of the heavy industry, high heat applications that we need. But right now, it's very, very expensive to produce green hydrogen, and we have to have the capacity to not only produce renewable energy for electricity, but to produce it for hydrogen. So closing those gaps are really, key. That's what I would say, we need innovation. I come from the African American community. And so early on, I was noticing that I knew a lot of people that were being affected by COVID, like way before any of my colleagues did. So COVID has really given us an opportunity to see very clearly the disproportionate impacts that something like a pandemic, or in the case of climate, the climate crisis, has on different populations. And we recognize as we transition to a low carbon economy that we really need to keep in top of our mind how that impacts different population groups and make sure that it is a just and fair transition. We know that climate change is first going to impact those who live in the tropics and the subtropics and the poles. So a lot of people who are already fairly vulnerable are going to be the ones who are impacted the most. We need to keep in mind this is a climate justice issue, and it's a human issues. We need to put community and people at the center of this transition. And actually, that's the only way that it will really be sustainable, that we'll be able to make sustainable changes in our livelihoods, sustainable changes in our energy system, if we bring along people with that. We make people understand that there can be a better world here. This is an opportunity for us to have a really great new world that we can envision, and not just a hardship of changing away from using fossil fuels. I think in the climate arena, the private sector is key. They have so much ability to make a difference here. And this decade, the decade of the 20s, has to be our decade of action. So what I would ask, my ask to the private sector is to please follow the science, focus on reducing your footprint along the lines of science, and look to invest in nature, because we can't just solve the crisis of global warming. We must solve the issues that we have in terms of our planetary boundaries, of biodiversity, of water management, of what we're doing with our oceans. All of these are impacted by the private sector. So please, let's look at this as the decade of action. Let's look at it optimistically, and let's be the problem solvers we know that we are.
So like everybody else, I was grounded at home, spending most of my time on Zoom calls. But of course, I was also at home a lot and not traveling. So it was actually great to spend more time with my teenage kids who are 15 and 13 when the COVID hit in all of the countries where we work. We got into gear, essentially. We set up emergency task forces. People started to look at how do we deliver services? How do we maintain services to children as much as possible? What do we have to do? And we adapted, and we came up with a ton of innovative approaches, some higher tech, but a lot of them really low tech, because those are the contexts that we work in. Now, we had to do it very differently. How do you train community health workers if you're used to bringing them together in a classroom? So we trained people online. We went to deliver books via camels because children couldn't come into classrooms. We used radios and megaphones sometimes in order to keep instruction and education going for children. Where we're piloting augmented artificial intelligence chatbot to monitor online violence against kids online, which of course was already an emerging threat for children everywhere. But with the pandemic and everybody going online has really heightened in volume. So we're very concerned about how do we keep it safe online, and how do we help parents and children recognize warning signs. We actually have a collaboration with Oxfam and World Vision, where we've set up response innovation labs in 5 countries around the world, where we really try to tap into local innovation by local social enterprises, local community-led organizations. Because quite often the first responders is the community on the ground, and they come up with all kinds of innovative ideas. And it's not only about, yes, making sure that that broadband is everywhere and that people have access, although that is a big part of it. And we would encourage the private sector and governments to really prioritize that availability of affordable connectivity as a human right now. But again, then how do we make sure kids are trained and have the education that allows them to really to take that opportunity that provides for them, but also keep them safe. So they ran a local competition in that particular area of Uganda, and there were, I think, 30 or so ideas came up, and the winner of that particular competition was a local guy, a young engineer, undergraduate, who came up with a solution to actually do a contained dispenser with soap flakes that actually dispense safely and hygienically, so that people can. And it's a low-cost solution, and they're now rolling out those dispensers in Uganda. My call for action for the private sector and governments, and as well as financial institutions, would be to to not give up on our dreams that we can actually make real meaningful change on our sustainable development goals. Now is not the time to say, oh, we've got the pandemic, we can't possibly push for this, or we have to adjust our expectations. No, now is the time to double down on those ambitions. Those moonshot goals are within reach of our generation. It is not rocket science. It will take money, it will take a change in risk appetite, and it will take real collaboration.
The two things that I've seen become so incredibly valuable in the development of technology and the building of equity, first and foremost, is thinking about platforms as proactively creating inequality. We all have different levels of proficiency with different technologies. We all have access to different technologies. I work for an organization called Frontline SMS, which has been building last mile services for a long time. So the gap in last mile connectivity has always been up close and personal. And I think that what we've seen in the way that we deliver COVID services is that we have to proactively reach out to communities. We have to proactively build for different and complementary audiences and tailor the engagement to the people we're trying to reach. And then the second one, I think, often gets described as a trust crisis, but I think of it more as an integrity crisis. And, I come from a relatively simple place, and, the way that integrity works in markets there, you want to be able to hold someone accountable. You want to be able to be sure that the system that you're participating in is giving you a fair shake and that your rights are being well represented, if not well protected. And so I think one of the things that we're starting to see is the need to build systems that augment or buttress the integrity of digital platforms. And that means increasing the amount of participation and increasing the way that people are able to define and shape how their own rights get executed through data and digital ecosystems. In a really specific and tangible way, I think that we're seeing that digital services rely on a sense of legitimacy, and that legitimacy, to an extent, increasingly relates to accountability. And that accountability can be inside of a digital system or inside of a platform, but it can also be outside of a platform. And the ability to hold a platform as a company accountable, as well as the ability to hold other participants on a platform accountable, has been really important. And so one really specific example of this is eBay. And in the beginning, eBay was very, very early in the e-commerce space, and there wasn't a lot of public confidence. And so in addition to, of course, running a marketplace, eBay had to deal with how they were going to manage the disputes between buyers and sellers, which were inevitable at a marketplace of their size. And over a period of time, they developed what's called an online dispute resolution system. A system that takes the user experience so seriously that it builds a little internal court system may sound like a lot, but if you need user trust, or if you want users to engage, having a system where you manage the inevitable errors or adversarial gaming or bad actors that end up getting into any system that progresses past a point of scale. These kinds of systems have a huge, huge role to play in underpinning the integrity of the ecosystem. I'd love to see a more ambitious and human-led approach to technology. I think so much of our focus in development at this moment is around removing the inefficiencies of process and reducing friction. And I think that we sometimes forget that you can overcorrect. And so I think in the future, we're already moving toward, and I think we'll see more and more participatory and exciting and kind of high integrity, ambitious, rights respecting technology infrastructure.
We really appreciate the different perspectives from these public good organizations. Now, please go ahead and enjoy your break. You can learn how to make tea with Degi or explore all of our interactive experiences on the platform. To the left of your screen in the navigation system, you can click on resources, and this will open a tab where you will be able to access the beach networking, the trust tree, the virtual reality experience, and the soundtrack and other cool stuff.
We've seen some good activity out there already. Remember, you can also find links to these across the bottom of the platform. I'll run over to the trust tree. I now have some thoughts on how to finish the sentence. We build trust through.
Okay, good luck. I've already received a couple chats, so I'm going to go ahead and respond to that.
Great. And then let's meet on the beach after where we can do some of those things. Great time to stand up and do a quick stretch during the break. I also want to swing by some of the beach tables.
Nice shades, Taniqua. See you there.
Today I'm going to show how to make a Mongolian milk tea with dumplings. We drink a lot milk tea to survive extreme cold weather. I like to cook this tea for my kids and family during every Sunday during the spring as medicine for tiredness. So you have to first to boil black tea, and then while it's boiling, you have to prepare dumpling. So now I'm going to flavor the tea. For doing so, I need some animal fat. It's a sheep tail. So we usually fry this animal fat. Then I will add some cup of millet. I'm gonna add some barley flour. It smells so good. I'm going to add this black tea. One teaspoon of salt, 2 glasses around, I think. Stir frequently with large scoop. Now tea is ready. I'm going to add some dumpling. When the dumplings float on the top, they are done. So finally, I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of yellow butter. So the Mongolian milk tea with dumpling is ready. Enjoy! 잘 먹겠죠?
Hello there, I am Amna Habiba, a 15-year-old 10th grader from Pakistan and the founder of Global Creative Hub. My work revolves around STEM, and I aspire to use the power of tech for the betterment of society. I live in Pakistan, and it's the 5th largest country where young people reside. With more than 17 million girls aged 15 to 24, only 14% of women account for the tech sector. And to think that 17 million girls around my age have never had the opportunity to acquire these skills is alarming. I usually hear the sentence, tech fields are only for boys. This is more than just a sentence. It is a mindset deep embedded into the mind of many people, mainly girls. We all can make the world a better place for girls by supporting them, empowering them, and raising awareness.
So what I think women can do to challenge gender stereotypes in STEM-related fields, one will be to step up and take action.
By promoting awareness campaigns about empowerment, women can feel more encouraged to be engaged in the STEM initiatives.
See more girls in STEM. We need a fund for them, for education in this area, and also to support initiatives that encourage them.
We can promote gender equality by promoting girls, by giving them chances to go in different schools, like Akina Chicks. They have given me the chance to come here. Now I can go out and do tech. I'm very proud of myself.
Through technological tools, for example, creating digital maps of the risks that women, unlike men, face in the public space will help us pinpoint the critical locations and facilitate the improvement of those locations.
Lesbian, bisexual, and transgender women are often undermined. We need to challenge gender stereotypes to foster ethical and equitable advancement for a more just, prosperous, and resilient society.
So if women want to take charge and take ownership, then no one can take that away from them. I think once we solve these two problems, then women can do a lot.
So what I'd like to first of all, welcome to the 2021 Sustainability Exchange. We call it a fireside chat, and I'm thrilled that there actually is a fireplace behind Strive. So at least one of us is by a fireplace. Maybe just to start, if I could ask each one of you to just introduce yourself and give a bit of who you are, where you come from, and what you've been working on, and then we'll go into a kind of Q&A after that.
Well, my name is Strive Masiwa. I'm 60 years old this year. I have been a telecoms tech entrepreneur for the last 35 years, building telecommunications infrastructure across Africa. And that's what I do. That's my passion, and I build businesses that enable the internet, enabled telephony connectivity. When I was a young entrepreneur, I bid for a mobile license in my home country, Zimbabwe. And at that time, there was no mobile telephony in most parts of Africa and even the world, because we're talking 1993. And of course, the government were not aware of this kind of development. And so they resisted very, very aggressively my request for a license. And I persisted and went to court. And it became a very famous legal battle, because it went on for 5 years. And it went all the way to my country's constitutional court, which resolved the matter by ending the monopoly in telecommunications. And that triggered the debate as to whether telecommunications was domain authority for nations, because the debate I triggered was that the private sector could do it better.
Well, fascinating. And even today we're having this debate about the appropriate roles of public and private in all sectors, but especially in the digital space and in infrastructure, where it's so critical. And many of these services that were historically really considered public are now increasingly shifting to private. But I guess the question for all of us is, how do you make sure that happens in a fair way? And it's not just accentuating inequalities. And maybe we can talk about that a bit more as we go forward. But super interesting, Strive. Butena, how about you?
I was part of a big infrastructure team, energy, transport, water, I think sanitation we had at that time. And we were in what we call a scoping mission in a landlocked country, very small country in Africa. And everybody was trying to make a pitch to the Minister of Finance about, the importance of their sector for the development of the country. And of course, everybody spoke, everybody made very good case. When it came to me, I tried to make the case about ICT. And that was in 2004. I mean, at that time, the minister mentioned, I need a road to take my grandma to the hospital when she needs care. And I said, yeah, but maybe you could get more immediate care by, connecting to the internet. So it seemed like science fiction at that time.
Earlier in my career, I spent some time living in Vietnam. This is about 20 years ago. But when you travel up into the hill country and you'd meet the farmers, they were really not getting such a small portion of the value out of the coffee. And they would be selling everything to middlemen and kind of brokers who would come up and collect. And basically, they had no information about what the market price really was. So they were really at the mercy of the middlemen. And then at some point, they got their hands on a Bloomberg terminal up in the mountains. And they had some way to get satellite access. And they were all of a sudden connected to the coffee exchanges around the world. The way I saw the farmers really capture a much larger share of the benefit of their product was really kind of inspiring to me. So I think it's such a powerful space, and everyone comes to it from different reasons, and you guys obviously have spent your professional lives dedicated to it. So super interesting to think about. I was thinking, Strive, one of the many things that you're involved with is the African Union's Special Envoy to help the private sector with COVID response on the continent. And clearly the link between digital development and technology and information and pandemic response is something that's still evolving. How did you get involved with that work with the COVID response? And what are the key issues you see now in terms of where we should be putting our attention?
I'm actually responsible for Africa's COVID response, right across the board. I spend my time helping the continent acquire vaccines, test kits. I've just helped to negotiate the acquisition of 400 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I'm leading the negotiations with a number of suppliers at the moment. So this has been a sabbatical work for the last 12 months because it needed to be done. So I work with governments, virtually all the African governments, both in terms of helping them to get medical supplies, but also trying to mobilize financial resources to deal with the livelihood challenges that have emerged.
Yeah, it's really challenging situation. And I wonder, Butena from the bank also has been very involved in trying to unblock some of this work. How does the digital work at the World Bank engage with something like pandemic response?
There is a whole thing around data, the whole thing around, how do we make sure that the safeguards around the data of people who are vaccinated is used according to rules that protect their privacy.
So Strive, we hear a lot these days about super apps.
We ourselves have a number of super apps in the market. We have an app called Sasai, which you can download as Sasai app. It's an app that provides at least 14 different services off the same platform. That's what makes it a super app. And is driven by an AI engine. So you're able to draw data from everything from mobility to media to fintech services across a common platform. And that's already been downloaded in over 180 countries since we launched it a year ago. So super apps can, certainly in my space, they're very powerful. You can do the communication services, you can do media services, e-commerce services, all off a common platform.
Great. Butena, any observation from your side? How do you see this from the policy side? And when you deal with governments, are kind of policies and regulations in this space keeping up with the market, or is there more work to be done in that?
Just to give a few, Spectrum, if we talk about Spectrum, this is really the lungs of the digital economy. This is what gives the air. And how do we make sure that there are good spectrum policies where governments, have the right policy choice between getting the revenues today versus thinking about the market being more active and getting revenues from the usage. How do we make sure that there is good framework for infrastructure sharing to avoid duplication of investment? How do we have policies that target the affordability gap? So there is a big space for policies and regulations. How do we make sure that no one is left behind?
And Strive, in terms of looking forward in this space, with all the opportunities and all the challenges, how can an institution or an entity like the World Bank Group, on the public side, on the private side, IFC, World Bank, how can we engage more? What would you like to see from Butena, from myself, from the World Bank Group? How can we support this in the right way? Where should we put our energies?
The reason Africa is not getting into, we're not seeing e-commerce companies emerge in Africa or new media emerge in Africa is because the kind of capital needed to develop those kind of businesses is not available. There's nowhere an African entrepreneur could go to have got the kind of patient capital that supported an Amazon or an Uber to be developed. So we're not going to be there at the forefront, even if we have the ideas. Some introspection, encouraging building new types of institutions. World Bank, for example, should be looking at how to seed more venture capital in Africa. There is no venture capital in Africa, not to the extent that we need for a revolution in employment creation. We need mass entrepreneurship if we are going to change the calculus on jobs. And so our young people, it's the glass half full, half empty. This is for the world now. Africa's young people are not being given a fair crack at this. And they're running out of patience.
That's a great challenge, Strive. Thank you for pushing the conversation, even if it's a bit uncomfortable. It's always good to be challenged. But it reminds me of many years ago when we first started investing in renewable energy as IFC, as an international development bank focused on private clients. Our first ever investment in a wind power project, was a relatively small investment. And it was the first one ever. And to get it through the system of approvals was a nightmare because it was different. It was new. You couldn't look to historical track records to see, what are the ratios and the percentage of failures or success, or what are the key lessons. So it's very tough for conservative institutions like banks to make those leaps of faith. But I think, as you say, that's what we have to do. I mean, clearly we have to be leading as IFC in that space and taking more risk and learning as we go. And we will make failures, we will make mistakes, and we will lose some money from time to time, and that's okay. But I think it's super important that we remember that as a development organization, we have to do that. That's our job, that's our mission, that's why we're here. So thank you for challenging. Butena, maybe a last question for you. What gives you hope these days?
We have this ecosystem approach for digital transformation. So digital connectivity is very important, but if you have the digital connectivity and you don't have the entrepreneurs and you don't have the digital skills and you don't have the applications, this is, basically having pipes that will end up empty without content. So, last year and a half, we worked with the African Union to develop the digital strategy for Africa. And it's, the heart of it is exactly, how do we make sure that we look at digital transformation as an ecosystem? And it really goes to the point that, Strive mentioned. If we look at Africa, youth is a very important resource for the continent. How do we make sure that there is a good entrepreneurship ecosystem? The ideas, as you mentioned, Strive are there. They're not the things that are missing. But how do we make sure that, these young people have the support to go towards, taking their ideas to the next level.
And Strive, last question to you, the same question. What gives you hope looking forward today?
Young African entrepreneurs from every corner of the continent. They share more, discuss more the issues which I'm putting to them, which is about how do we create a better, more prosperous, peaceful Africa through entrepreneurship. What we've got to do is to ensure that they get the support that nothing special. The kind of support that a young entrepreneur would get in Shenzhen or in Silicon Valley is missing to the young African. Okay, that's all we gotta fix. And so I when I wake up and I read their comments every morning over my coffee, and I answer many of them, that gives me hope. I'm always telling them that there are really important people listening to you. Just think that there's the IFC World Bank ready to listen to you, because they don't think people listen to them. So let's just listen to them.
That's fantastic. Let's do it. Let's do it. Thanks, Strive, for the reminder. And thanks to both of you for joining this fireside chat with IFC. Thank you for your help and your support, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you.
A core part of my mandate as the Envoy on Youth is to bring the United Nations closer to young people and bring young people closer to the United Nations. COVID-19 has exacerbated existing challenges facing young people around the world. 1 in 8 young people do not have access to education, the majority of whom are girls. 1 in 6 young people lost their jobs during the pandemic. Access to sexual and reproductive health and rights has decreased, leading to an increase in unwanted pregnancies and an additional 10 million girls at the risk of child marriages. Young people's heightened mental health issues are a continuing concern. Yet, despite being disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, young people have demonstrated extraordinary courage, leadership, resilience, and innovation in their desire to build a more sustainable, peaceful, and just world for current and future generations. Young people's activism often begins online, where they organize virtually and advocate through social media, but it never ends there. This is especially true when we think of the impact young people have had in terms of global climate action. Through consistent calls for urgent action by leaders, decision makers, and businesses, today's young people continue to hold leaders to account. I want to leave all of you with one key message. It's not enough to simply listen to young people. We also need to provide them with stable access to spaces, tools, resources, and investments that they need. Businesses, governments, and other organizations have a critical role to play here for. It's your investments in intergenerational partnerships that will enable young leaders to bring their innovative ideas to fruition.
My name is Michaela McKay, and I'm the Director and Chief Operating Officer of the Directorate of Science, Technology, and Innovation.
And my name is Gisela Kibobet, and I will be asking her a lot of questions about the DSTI. Okay. So in less than a year after the pandemic hit Sierra Leone, we have been rated as a low-risk country. Did technology play a role in lowering the movement?
There were several different specialized pillars that were set up to be able to guide the response for Sierra Leone. One of these pillars was the ICT pillar. One thing that was also critical was for the government to be able to understand the mobility of people. So we engaged with our mobile network operators to see how we can use the call data records, aggregated data, of course, and this data was analyzed. So we got to see and understand movement within Freetown, which is the capital city, and also within Freetown and the districts. And also, we were able to use drones to monitor whether or not people were moving during the lockdowns. So one thing that was certain during that time was that Sierra Leone was not in a position to have very long periods of lockdowns, because the areas and people that did move during this time, we realized that they moved in search of basic facilities like access to water and things of that nature. So tracking and tracing is really critical during the pandemic. But bearing in mind our operational circumstances, we were not able to deploy applications that could be used on smartphones, because although we have 80% of the population that has access to phones, only about 20% of the population has access to smartphones. So we had to use hybrid solutions in that case, where information was collected manually, and then we had to make sure that data was uploaded now electronically so that we could be able to do analysis.
With the expansion of social media like TikTok, Instagram, and House Party, how can outside influences like DSTI help us for our rights as children?
So, in fact, recently what we did in Sierra Leone was to table the cybersecurity bill through the Ministry of Information and Communication, which has been enacted. Now, within that bill, there's specific provision creating offenses for any person, firm, or corporation that may possess or even disclose or circulate information or data relating to a child and pornography. So that in itself creates a large amount of protection for children as and when they use these various platforms.
What are your plans to ensure no one is left behind in the pathway to a digital economy?
Digital identity is a right. For you to be recognized within your economy, people have to be able to identify you as an individual, because that is the only way your services could be met. Now, when it comes to digital governance, this is where DSTI plays a critical role. So we support the government in how we can digitize our processes and procedures to make government engagement with the citizenry more user-friendly. When it comes to digital economy, really, the primary focus is how do we move from cash transactions to electronic transactions. Bearing in mind, although cash transfer is actually innovation, it's right, but as the world is growing and as we are developing, we have to see how best we can move from that to digital cash transfer platforms. All right, so Giselle, you mentioned earlier that you use TikTok and House Party, all these different platforms quite often. Mm-hmm. What are some of the challenges you face when using these platforms?
The legal age for most social media is usually 13, and right now I'm 12, so I don't post things. Usually I just use them to talk to my real life friends. Usually, like for a House Party, I use it to do calls. Snapchat, I just use it to take pictures, to text my friends. WhatsApp, same thing. TikTok, I just watch videos for entertainment. Thank you very much. That is me, Gisela Kibobets, with
Michaela McKay, Director and Chief Operating Officer of DSTI.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is, having worked in Africa most of my career, the entrepreneurship, the creativity, the intelligence is out of this world. I can't imagine the frustration when you have the ideas, but you don't have the resources. Those could be technological resources, they could be financial resources, they could be mentorship to get those ideas out there. So I think that Africa is blossoming, but to get it to its full potential is going to require an awful lot more investment on a number of dimensions.
Well, talking about how urgent it is to have entrepreneurs creating the jobs of the future, there's another group in society, artists and creatives, who have really been pressured under COVID to find new ways of living, new ways of doing their business, and really bringing us all a lot of joy and hope in the process. So we're going to turn now to Lisa to tell us about what creative industries have been up to.
Since the beginning of time, art has told the story of who we are. From cave art sketches on hunting and gathering, and griots sharing fables under baobab trees, to virtual reality experiences and digital storytelling apps, one thing remains the same. Art has been and continues to be a trusted tool to help connect us as people in an ever-changing society. We trust art to help us learn and unlearn the ways in which we see the world. So what happens when that world is turned upside down? When venues are empty? When film sets are canceled? When theaters are closed? When microphones are muted? When a global pandemic sets in? COVID-19 has opened our eyes to exactly how void our world can become without a viable creative community, and how artists' livelihoods can be threatened. But artists are resilient. The creative economy, which employs more than 30 million creative workers around the world, started to adapt. As the world was thrust into digital spaces, artists followed suit. At a time when we felt disconnected, artists united us across televisions, laptops, and cell phones. This power of creativity that artists hold to adapt, to innovate, to pivot, is what led the United Nations to declare 2021 as the International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development. The world continues to face immense challenges, and artists can help us face them. While countries battle over climate policies, Thai graffiti artist TRK and Soravis P are collaborating with Converse to create large-scale murals in Bangkok's polluted downtown areas using smog-eating paint. While artists have historically struggled with protecting intellectual property rights, crypto art using NFTs are revolutionizing the way digital artists certify their photos, videos, audio, and other digital work on the blockchain. And as the tradition of oral history in Africa changes, the new digital storytelling app African Echoes entertains and educates younger generations about culture and history. It's clear that as the world relies more on technology and automation, our value as artists and creatives is growing. Because the one thing you can't automate is creativity. And as artists, we must recognize that our role in society is more critical than ever. Because we can have all the technological advancements in the world, but we still need art to keep us connected as human beings. We must use our art to break down divisions. We must share our talents to help others express fears or concerns about this new world. We must use our critical thinking and problem-solving skills to disrupt systems that are exclusive. We must use our independence to speak out with new possibilities using our bold and liberated voices. COVID-19 has shown us that art is fragile, but resilient and so very essential. We must give artists representation in institutions and spaces where distrust is building. We must give our support politically, economically, and socially because we rely on their creativity to build a more fair, inclusive, and sustainable world.
Je suis ravie d'être avec toi ce matin pour discuter. Je suis toujours ravie de rencontrer les jeunes femmes entrepreneurs qui font bouger les lignes. Et j'aimerais peut-être donner l'occasion à toutes les personnes qui nous regardent de mieux te connaître.
Je suis agronome de profession et parallèlement aussi, je suis communicante, beaucoup plus orientée vers la communication du développement avec une approche genre. Le déclic, je l'ai eu très jeune. À chaque fois que j'accompagnais ma mère faire les courses pour le besoin des cuisines, je me rendais compte que essentiellement des produits qui composaient le panier que nous achetions venaient des pays étrangers. Et tout le temps, je me posais la question à savoir, mais à quand je verrai un produit made in Sénégal? À quand je verrai un produit made in Africa? Et au fur et à mesure que je grandissais, je recevais certaines questions, mais il y avait toujours des zones d'ombre. Et après que j'ai eu mon baccalauréat, je me suis dit, écoute, c'est le moment de trouver non pas des questions, mais des solutions concrètes par rapport à ces questions-là qui ne sont plus des questions, mais des problèmes pour moi. Alors, je me suis lancée dans les études en agronomie. En tant que directrice de ONU Femmes, à date, quelles sont les démarches que vous avez eu à faire dans ce sens-là? Quelles sont les réalisations dont vous êtes les plus fiers, n'est-ce pas, en termes d'évolution pour l'autonomisation de ces femmes-là dans le domaine de l'agriculture?
Lorsqu'il s'agit de l'accès au marché, nous sommes convaincus que la technologie est un catalyseur. Aujourd'hui, pour réduire les pertes post-récolte des femmes que nous appuyons, nous voulons qu'elles aient des contrats d'achat Et ces contrats d'achat, nous voulons les avoir sur une plateforme et ONU-Femmes a développé une plateforme qu'on appelle Buy from Women, acheter avec les femmes, jënd ci jigéen ñi en Wolof. Et ça permet justement à des acheteurs potentiels qui connaissent la taille des parcelles des femmes et leur production de rentrer dans une relation contractuelle et qui permet à ces femmes de vendre toutes leurs récoltes avant la fin. C'est la technologie qui nous permet ça parce qu'aujourd'hui, les femmes rurales au nord du Sénégal ont tout un portable.
À partir de leur téléphone portable, elles sont capables maintenant de prendre une photo d'une plante malade et automatiquement, grâce à une application que Dictaf aussi a mis en place qui s'appelle SOS Agri, cette image-là est renvoyée dans le serveur et elles sont informées en temps réel du nom de la maladie dont souffre la plante, comment traiter cette maladie-là, où se procurer ce produit-là et à quelle dose même utiliser ce produit-là. Donc, plus besoin d'attendre un expert en agronomie le temps qu'il arrive sur place et que les dégâts soient déjà difficiles à maîtriser. Et surtout, ce sont des solutions de ce genre-là qu'il faut développer, des solutions qui sont déjà en langue locale pour qu'elles puissent se l'approprier, mais qui ne demandent pas une haute technologie, une haute connaissance en technologie pour qu'elles puissent elles aussi se l'approprier. Et cette technologie-là, en fait, permet de réduire le gap qu'il y a entre les hommes agriculteurs et les femmes agriculteurs. Je parle même de façon générale. En général, la technologie permet de réduire l'écart qu'il y a entre la production agricole en Afrique et en Europe. Parce que moi, je considère la technologie comme la troisième révolution et l'Afrique n'est pas en reste cette fois-ci, au moins pour cet appel-là, à cette révolution-là. Moi, je prends la femme africaine comme une ressource de développement. Alors, il faudra vraiment que l'Afrique se penche beaucoup plus sur cette ressource-là, qu'on équipe davantage cette ressource-là, qu'on outille cette ressource-là. Et quand on parle d'équiper et d'outillage, évidemment, on pense au financement, on pense également à tout ce qui est infrastructure, on pense également à tout ce qui est capacitation. Parce que si on équipe cette ressource-là, évidemment, on pourra faire un grand bond en avant.
Aujourd'hui, lorsqu'on nous dit qu'il nous faudra plus de 100 ans pour réduire les écarts, nous ne voulons pas attendre 100 ans. Nous voulons un pas de géant, nous voulons ce qu'ils appellent en anglais un leapfrog, puisque nous pensons que cette émergence dont l'Afrique rêve passera par les femmes. Nous sommes convaincus que l'émergence est une femme.
Tout à fait.
My name is Cynthia Ann Dumako. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Western Global Technology. Western Global is into the production of sachet and bottled water. Currently, we have about 62 direct employees. I've attended a lot of trainings that has been organized by the IFC, training on record keeping. We had training on how to make yourself ready for loan from the banks. Training for our employees. After the training, our record keeping at the factory has changed drastically. When the company started, you work with the company, you get pregnant, you go and give birth, you wouldn't come back. So I started, maternity leave. Now your job is secured and your salary is intact. And I am just proud to say that it is because of the training from the IFC and then the CDC. The sector is predominantly a male-dominated sector. It was very difficult or challenging as a woman to venture into this sector. Some of the challenges I encountered was balancing responsibility as a mother, as a wife, and then as an employee. They tag you as a hardcore woman, and then they tend to give you names. It was really hard at the initial stage, but what I did to overcome was the fact that once I'm determined to do what I'm doing, I never made those things to bother me. I can proudly say that in our locality here, my product is taking about 70 to 75% of the market share. We are always grateful to the IFC. The training has really come to help us, and we can't thank them enough.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Neelan Yüksel, and it is an honor for me to be speaking to you on behalf of Global Affairs Canada. We have enjoyed following Cynthia's inspirational story of hard work and success. She and the other trainees in this initiative are examples of why Canada is proud to be part of the Sustainability Exchange and to partner with the IFC in the natural resource sector through our joint Enhancing Extractive Sector Benefit Sharing project. This project is teaching essential skills to effectively run a business, which in turn create new opportunities for women like Cynthia and her employees in Kenya, Ghana, Guinea, and Cote d'Ivoire. Canada and the IFC are supporting similar initiatives and inspiring women across Africa and Latin America. Let's go to Bogota now to hear from Diana Rodriguez Franco, the Secretary of Women's Affairs.
Hello, Secretary of Women's Affairs of Bogota, Diana Rodriguez. Thank you very much for being with us at the IFC Sustainability Exchange. We are really happy to have you here. And to start, I would like to ask you a personal question. What have you learned about yourself during COVID-19 times?
What have I learned about myself? I think I've learned a few things, both about myself and both about working with others and the power of working collectively. As we forged alliances, it showed that what seemed impossible is possible. Things and programs that people would tell me, that's gonna take months or years to put in place. It took a week, right? And so I really think that the pandemic showed us, that the impossible is possible.
That's amazing and very inspiring, and it's also taking to one of the questions we wanted to ask you about the driver and the driver of a specific program that you are running in Bogota, which is the care system. I understand this is a flag program of the mayor, and can you tell us which is the main driver for Bogota, for the Bogota government to build a care system, which sounds to be very new, at least in Latin America?
Why is it such a central project in the city's administration? Because care has disproportionately fallen on the shoulders of women. Because time poverty is one of the main drivers of inequality. Because either we address time poverty, and we address time poverty for women, or inequality is going to be very difficult to address. Recovery coming out of COVID is going to be very difficult to address. Right? So we need to understand that women have been deprived of education, deprived of formal jobs, deprived of healthcare, deprived of multiple opportunities because of the burden of care. The care system ultimately has 3 goals. The first goal is to recognize the role of care and of caregivers. Let's just stop for a second and understand what care is. Let's put a name to this type of work and recognize it as such. So that's our first objective with the care system. The second objective is to redistribute, right, the unevenly shared responsibility of care. And redistribute it, as I said, between multiple actors, not just the city government, but multiple, and within the home, and between men and women, right? We need to share and redistribute care work. And lastly, the third objective, so the third R, is to reduce women's unpaid care work so that they gain free time, so they have time to finish their studies or pursue further studies. They have time to actually accept the job they're offered. They have time for themselves, right? And this is a huge issue in Bogota. Just to give you an idea, Bogota is a city of 8 million people. A little bit over half of the population are women. 9 out of 10 women in Bogota perform unpaid care work.
It seems many of our systems have been like male-driven, male-designed, so everything needs to be seen from the views of the women. So I wanted to ask you a question, and I'll shift to Spanish. Quisiéramos saber cómo se puede considerar el punto de vista de mujeres de diferentes orígenes que tiene Bogotá.
Yo creo que hay un lema del feminismo que es absolutamente vital para responder esta pregunta y es nada sobre nosotras sin nosotras. Y yo creo que eso debe ser el lema que guía y que de hecho nos guía a nosotros a la hora de tomar decisiones. La Secretaría de la Mujer tiene una dirección de enfoque diferencial que precisamente busca tener en cuenta permanentemente las perspectivas de las mujeres indígenas, rom, palenqueras, LGBT, ¿no? Mujeres mayores. Entonces, tenemos mujeres, por ejemplo, que están en actividades sexuales pagadas, es decir, tenemos una dirección de enfoque diferencial que permanentemente está mirando eso.
Secretary, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure having you here and listening about the very good things that your team and Bogota is challenging yourselves and taking the risk of integrating new concepts to really ensure the situation for women can change.
I really appreciate the city of Bogota bringing attention to unpaid care. What about you, Shasa?
I can totally relate to Cynthia. The balancing act of trying to get your kids to school and yourself to work, that takes some passion and commitment.
Hi Mark, very, very good to see you today and probably just to see anybody in person at this rate, honestly. Welcome to today.
It's great to be here, and again, it's nice to be talking to people and not talking through a video screen. So it's been a tough year for everyone, and it's been a tough year in the organisation. It's been a tough year everywhere. So it's not, hopefully, we're on the way out of it.
Anglo-American strategy, it's built on tech and sustainability. Those are two things that are very, very big concepts. They're very important, but they're huge. And perhaps if you could just help us understand a couple of examples as to what we are concretely doing and some of the technologies we're rolling out.
Okay. So what we're trying to do is reduce energy, reduce water consumption, and reduce our physical footprint. So by being more precise in mining the ore body, we're mining less waste and we're providing a cleaner product before we put it through the mill. We put it through what we call a bulk ore sorter. It sorts the material into high grade and lower grade. And if you then look at the metal produced, hopefully we'll have used 30% less energy, we'll have used 50% less water, and we'll have actually produced more metal from a plant that has a footprint or a fixed footprint. So we've used that capital more efficiently. And from our point of view, that also provides the basis for a much better financial return. So that's bulk ore sorting. We're a founding member with the World Bank and IFC on climate smart mining. And so from our point of view, that really is something that can help change the world.
What do you think is Anglo-American's biggest social challenge today and the mining industry as a whole?
I think there are two things. Firstly, we don't explain mining in broader society, and we don't explain that the products we produce literally make the world work. And the footprint that we use relative to other industries is tiny. And people have heard me talk about we drive 45% of global economic activity through direct revenue from the products we produce, support services that we use to generate those products. And then if you look at construction, all of the materials for construction we produce. The other point is the impact we have on communities as a consequence of what we do. We bring infrastructure, and that could be roads, that could be energy, that could be health and medical services, that could be support in education, that could be water, it could be any number of things. It could be communications infrastructure, it could be anything you want it to be. We also bring a range of skills that local community may not normally have in those communities. So if we can connect as an engineering group with our local communities and help solve their problems with them, not tell them what they should solve, but solve the problems they see, then we can make a significant difference to those communities. And how do we help a community transform themselves to where they want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or 100 years? I shared a statistic with one of the politicians, and I said, in 2007, Anglo-American lost approximately 1,000 people to HIV. Last year, we lost 2 colleagues. And what we learned about education, support, making sure people understood their status, made sure people were on their antiretrovirals, helped us understand how we could land a message on COVID through our We Care program. And so We Care was really informed by experience back from our experiences with HIV. And we knew we could make a difference, and we used that to inform our approach. And then we shared that with governments as well. So there are different countries that have used a lot of the We Care stuff that we've done in helping them with their broader programs. In our operations, we've been able to manage infections in local communities to probably 1/3 of what we've seen in the broader regions. So Michelle, you're in a unique position where you work with us, so we're all colleagues at Anglo-American, but you're also on the other side of that conversation where you've got family in South Africa that see Anglo-American from a different perspective. So can I ask you the question, how has your family coped with COVID? And are there messages you think we could take to our organisation to help improve our response and support families in South Africa?
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for asking that question. I really appreciate that. I think just to give you a bit of context for me, in the beginning of this pandemic, when it first really hit South Africa and the UK as well, it put a lot of strain on the health systems, as well as the medical staff, and that's been all over the world. And I think personally for me, my mother is a nurse, so she's frontline, and I can remember in the beginning when she was dealing with an unsustainable amount of testing and treatment on a daily basis. She was stressed, she was scared, she was exhausted, and it was very, very difficult for all of us as a family to go through this with her. But more so, I was based here and I felt completely helpless. Look, I think Anglo-American has gone above and beyond during the time and still continues to from a financial perspective, but also rolling out physically ventilators and means to actually help during the pandemic. I think now it's really about caring about the mental health and the after effects of this.
I'm going to share a secret with you and half the rest of the world. I've got 7 children and I have not been able to convince any one of them to join the mining industry.
Not one.
Not one. And their retort was, look what it's done to you. So my question for you is, what can we do to attract young people to our industry? Because you've joined the industry.
We have a growing population who are concerned about what they purchase. Has it been ethically sourced? Is there a significant amount of effort put into the environmental sustainability? And then young people want transparency, they want openness. They want to know that what we've mined and what we've generated from that mining is going back to those host countries in some form or another. We deal with significant policy areas that will be the biggest policy areas of our time. Climate change, human rights, innovation, gender. Those are the things that young people really care about and want to know that we're working on. Fast forward to where I am today, working on another significant movement, which is the hydrogen economy. And nobody really couples mining with hydrogen or blockchain or a lot of things. And it's just nice to know that we are working on that now. We are actually addressing our climate issues by looking into green hydrogen. That's not something that people know.
So I take that as have someone articulate sell the message, and you're probably going to have a much better chance of attracting young people. So I need you to sell the message because I'm obviously not doing a good job. Cheers.
Thank you, Rob.
We have learned the infrastructure of institutions and tried to put our faith in its factory, but the fact is all things are flawed. But forgiveness must be achieved to allow imagination to redesign what it is we want to see, what it is we want to build. A new structure that reflects the heart of every human, removing what is exclusive and we build what is inclusive. A reimagining of curriculum that colors from every spectrum makes the campus the kind of canvas I want to paint my genius into. As long as the transformation is genuine, the institution could become the guidance for a globe in need of a new collaboration.
I'm listening to your words, baby. I know you're trying. You out here cause all your friends say we're exaggerating. We're overreacting big time. Not listening to their words, baby.
Imagine a door never shut, a hand reaching out, a step across, footprints not lost. Imagine a space to be.
Thank you for sticking with us. So glad to see Zahura join us again this year, and I absolutely love hearing from young people and topics that matter to them. We've seen this amazing shift from global development institutions increasingly turning to youth and arts to creatively communicate important messages. So now we're headed into our interactive breakout sessions. After, you'll come back to the main stage for a break, and following that break, you'll join us back here to hear from the incomparable Mary Robinson. So now for the breakouts. You should see them appearing now in the platform. You'll click and land in a Zoom room for your session. So go ahead and start choosing your breaks now. You'll be able to choose from one topic there on the screen. We have gaming for development. Please go there quickly so that you'll have time. Climate smart mining, sustainability linked financing, water innovation, inclusive infrastructure lessons, plastics in Nigeria, renewable energy and social impact, local action through data trust, IFC's machine learning ESG analyst, crash course in gender inclusion, and digital solutions for rural livelihoods. I'm running off to my session now, so see you here back after the break.
Hola a todos. Today we're having some nice Peruvian coffee with some fresh humitas.
First thing we're going to do is go buy our fresh humitas or green tamales. Now we select our favorite brand of coffee. Now we pour the hot water of the machine. Now we're going to start putting the coffee on the machine.
And we're going to pour the hot water. We have to do this process 3 times. Okay, now we're going to look how the coffee is pouring gota a gota. That's how we call it. We just have to wait a little bit more. Now you can see it. We're going to grab some green tamales and come back to enjoy them. Cordiana.
rocking it always. We're feeling this groove, so we're rocking it always. We're feeling this groove, so we're rocking it always. You know it doesn't feel right. I gave it all I got, yet I never seen your eyes so dry. A different kind of complex, a musical flex. You know we drop it and we yell surprise. Make it feel tight. Vocals in the middle, percussion on the side. Reverb just a little, we're working all night. The proof is in the pudding, so we're mixing it right. Yeah. We're feeling this groove, so we're rocking it always. We're feeling this groove, so we're rocking it always. We're feeling this groove, so we're rocking it always. Always.
I have got to get this money. Corona will not stop me. I've got plans for 2020. Corona will not stop me.
Oh yeah, you know we're doing alright. A little more courage, a little less fright. A little sanitizer, you gotta be a fighter. We'll take care of the music while you keep your mind right. As you can see, we evolving. Always pushing limits, never stalling. Our creative juices always flowing.
So, Mary, it's such a pleasure to welcome you to the IFC Sustainability Exchange.
It's great to see you again, Katrina. We've worked together and we know each other well, so this will be fun.
It will be fun. And I guess not many people know about our personal connection, so I should note that many years ago, you very kindly asked me to help you tell the stories in your wonderful book, Climate Justice, which I will shamelessly plug right now. And the book is very dear to me, as is our friendship. So it's just wonderful having you here. So thank you.
Well, it was how to communicate the urgency of climate change and make it personal in people's lives and make them think, this is something I have to be involved in. And I felt stories and the stories of people I'd got to know and got to admire as my heroes, if you like, this would be the way to do it. And you so helped to tell those stories.
One of the most extraordinary things about you is that you're a former head of state. You're currently the chair of the elders. You have a very large platform, and yet I've watched you time and time again giving up your seat at the table to allow people from grassroots organizations or indigenous communities and women have a voice. Why is it so important to have these people at the table?
I saw the difference it makes to have the frontline voices of those who were not only affected, but who were building resilience in their communities. So they actually had solutions. They knew what to do in circumstances of climate shocks because they'd done it. Before Paris and after Paris at different conferences, I heard those voices. And what happened was they electrified the room because the delegates were technicians. They lived in cities. They loved every phrase they were fighting for. And, you know, it was all a scientific, technical, rather male environment of fighting about and not giving away to others on issues. And then suddenly you had the truth to power. You had the voices that really electrified the room.
Your podcast with Maeve Higgins, the tagline for the podcast is "Climate change is a man-made problem with a feminist solution." So can you talk a little bit more about this? What are the solutions and what do they look like today?
I always explain that man-made is generic. It's all of us. And of course, feminist solutions include as many men as possible. And more men are, if they're heads of state, having cabinets that are equal, having gender parity and understanding. And the feminist solution is often the way that women have evolved a doing as leaders. It's problem solving, it's collaborative, it's not hierarchical, it listens. And, you know, more men are now also leading in this way. And it's really incredibly important because it builds a kind of trust between the leader and those who are dependent on good leadership for the policies that they need. And we need more of that. We have a lot of fractures in our world at the moment, a lot of fractures even in multilateralism. So I'm a great believer in this way of doing. I also now understand, I think Archbishop Tutu really taught me this, the incredible power of humor. When people are relaxed and laughing, you can then make a really serious point because you formed a kind of bond with them in some way. And that's why in Mothers of Invention, we've interviewed women working in their communities in the south of the United States and the global south, and showing the solutions they've come up with in relation to seeds, in relation to all kinds of things, innovation, high-tech innovation, nature-based solutions. And they're exciting, and they kind of grip people. And I'm really glad the podcast has reached a lot of people. Often young men say to me, here in Dublin, when I stop them, they stop me in the street and say, "I love your podcast," and I love that.
What's the role of trust in society? What sort of partnerships do we need across governments, the private sector, and civil society to address the climate crisis?
That's an interesting combination. We do need the transformation. We really do. But there is a breakdown of trust in a lot of technology on dealing with climate, because people go for big. I've been in countries and communities where big green projects are not well received because they're not discussing with people on the ground how those projects are to go forward, and the people at the ground don't feel they'll benefit. I was in Honduras, and my mandate as the Special Envoy of the Secretary General on El Nino and climate in 2016. And I went to a community of women sitting on chairs, and I was under a tree, and they had pain in their eyes, and they said, "We have no water. How do you live without water?" And they said, "But there's a big hydro project quite close by, and it's steering the water away to the city. We have no benefit, but we had our trees knocked down." And it's a compelling problem. The Business and Human Rights Resource Centre has done homework on the human rights abuses by those putting in clean energy the wrong way. So it is extraordinarily important that technology talks to people on the ground about any project. In other words, that there is really good communication about what is being planned, and it's planned in the right scale, in the right way, and with the right knowledge and traditional wisdom of local people, so that the project will be well received.
The last time we spoke, you mentioned that you and your husband, Nick, had welcomed another new grandchild. And I know that you have referred to yourself upon occasion as an angry granny. Can you tell me why you're an angry granny?
I'm very much enjoying our youngest grandchild, who's now 8 months old. But I keep thinking about her life, about how her life will be in 2050. I actually think we need to position ourselves that this decade that we're beginning is the most important decade in human history. And probably 2021 is the most important year of that decade.
Well, Mary, it's always a pleasure. I'm so inspired as always, and thank you for your time.
Well, keep up the good work.
Changing the world means above all saving the planet. Because obviously we don't have a planet B. Climate change is a global challenge that unifies all the young people's efforts.
In this moment, young people have the capacity and have the resilience to provide solutions to the biggest problems, the biggest questions. And we need the support of society to lead the way.
I'm happy to see a lot of programs like encouraging young people to start their green startups, launch eco-friendly businesses, start advocacy campaign, and even like at the associative level, like a lot of young people are engaged and a lot of resources are being mobilized within the civil society.
Over the time, in my global climate activism work, I share the important aspects of the Arab youth and how young people in the Arab world are also in the forefront in our climate action voices.
Our voice matters, and we will fight for it.
Hello, my name is Pablo, and I work with scientists and designers to turn real-world numbers into art, data sculptures. This is an IFC event about technology, trust, and transformation. Let's look at stories of transformation made of data about demographics and migration. This is a population pyramid. How many people ages 0 to 1 age 50 all the way to age 100. We can see that there are more children than young adults and fewer older adults. This front slice is for the year 1950, split by sex. The global population was about 2.5 billion people. Over time, babies are born, people live longer, there's progress in health, nutrition, safety. Fast forward to 2019, and the global population is now almost 8 billion. That involved a lot of investments. Note the mild sex asymmetry. Statistically speaking, grandmas outlive grandpas. Now from the world, let's go to the small island nation of Maldives. In 1950, the typical population pyramid shape. Children, adults, older adults. Over time, things change. Now, what about recent years? What is this? Many, many more young adult males. This is the impact of immigration. Construction, hospitality workers coming from Bangladesh and beyond to support the tourism boom in the Maldives. Building beautiful resorts on the water, creating opportunities and risks. Much of this new infrastructure will likely be underwater before the end of its lifetime, doomed by sea level rise and extreme events. Let's look at a different place. The state of Amazonas in Brazil, a state twice as large as Turkey. When thinking of Amazonas, most people think of rainforest, deforestation, yes, and there's more. Here is a population data sculpture for the state of Amazonas split in two halves. Instead of male and female, here we have rural versus urban. For the rural, in 1970, we had about 500,000 people. Over time, about a stable number of children were born, so in the last census, 2010, because people lived longer, we have about 750,000 people in rural areas. And in cities, in 1970, about 400,000 people, but over the decades, with population growth and rural to urban migration, whoa! Look at that. There's now about 2.7 million people living in cities in the state of Amazonas. Today, the GDP of the state of Amazonas comes largely from industry and the services sector. Only 7% of GDP comes from agriculture. This is a story of transformation. Cities are central to technology and jobs, but are we adequately addressing access to basic services? And what about trust?
Visualization of data is important to build trust, but data on trust itself is even more important.
Thankfully, we have data from the Lloyd's Register Foundation World Risk Poll. Learn and see more by visiting this website. Data, like art, can inspire us. Wishing you responsible leadership, and thank you.
Welcome all to this Sustainability Exchange and to this session dedicated to energy transition and impact. And the three of your companies being great clients and partners of IFC. So we're delighted to have you here to talk about these two topics. But perhaps let's start with a question which is a bit more personal. Perhaps with you, Thierry, in terms of particularly for young people listening in, what are the skills you have found to be of the greatest help, the most relevant in your job?
I mean, my cryptic answer would be basically bridging the short term with the long term. But the more explicit answer would be that in the short term, the sort of skills that we need at Meridiam is people capable of integrating the complexity of infrastructure and public infrastructure in particular and energy, which means an ability to marry technical, financial, environmental, social, sustainability issues with agility and and speed, and at the same time transform that into a long-term thinking and long-term strategy.
Daniel, on your end, what would you answer to the same question?
Yeah, I think if I can say, I think being humble and open to everybody's opinion, let's say, especially when working at a multinational or multicultural environment. If I can add also, in these times of big changes, innovation is more important than ever to keep competitive advantages and to thrive. If we don't innovate, our projects or companies will tend to disappear. And lastly, I would add, to step out of the comfort zone. And this is also for both private and professional lives.
Valerie, let's slightly change the question. On your end, looking at this last year, what has been the biggest challenge for you?
I would answer that over the last years, the biggest challenge has been for me to be patient and to keep constant without becoming angry or depressed. Energy is a long-term industry. Africa and the Middle East are regions where timing is not perceived in the same way than in a big European corporate. As a result, projects often take a long time before becoming a reality, when in parallel there are multiple urgencies to address. Millions of Africans without electricity, energy transition to push, climate change to tackle. As I am not a patient woman, I am engaged. So for me, the slow path is sometimes really a challenge to endure.
Let's perhaps, from that one, focus on what you were touching on, which is clean energy, renewable energy project in Africa. What would you see as the main challenges and perhaps also opportunities to scale up and do more in that space?
So in Africa, the main challenges, of course, is to find good projects. There are a lot of money available thanks to DFIs. There are huge needs, but at the end of the day, it's very challenging to develop projects with good governance, proper environmental and social criteria, appropriate knowledge.
Thanks. And Thierry, Meridiam has also been very active in Africa over the last years. What's your personal take on that same question? What do you see today as the key challenges and opportunities?
One of the initiatives that I would, last year when we launched this Africa Infrastructure Fellowship Program, during COVID, we had 10 participants from governments from 5 countries. And this year we have 125 candidates from 23 countries in Africa. So I guess that somehow, somewhere, governments realize that they need to build up their skills, because to me, this is a real bottleneck. It's never really been money. It's never really been risk appetite, because these things can be solved. It's really been the delivery process.
Moving to technological frontier, in terms of new technologies, Daniel, on your end, and for FRV, what do you see as the most promising technology in this energy transition space? I don't know, from hydrogen storage, carbon capture. What do you think may be more of a dead end or not yet ready for massive investments?
I think clearly batteries are becoming a must as renewable energy penetration increases in many places. We at FRV, we are strong believers on that. We are active investors already in standalone battery projects in the UK, so we have 2 projects there. We are also active investors in Australia, and the same thing. So we need markets that are developed for that, and also preparing to the future. Most of our solar developments that will be built in the coming years are already being developed with the option to put a battery on it, okay, in order to be able to access new sources of revenue, or potentially protecting ourselves from the high volatility that it's probable that will happen in markets with high renewable energy penetration. And we are also looking at hydrogen. It's very early stages yet, but we have the opportunity of the European Recovery Fund. And we are today here in Spain preparing a couple of projects, green hydrogen projects linked to mobility. So to do some kind of ecosystem to test these type of solutions and to produce green hydrogen for mobility, for buses or taxis and things like that.
On your end, Valerie and Thierry, how do you see it? What's becoming tangible? What's inspiring you, but also something that you feel is really going to present opportunities for you, for your company in the coming years?
If I can start, in addition to what Daniel said, maybe we could also mention floating solar as being very, very promising, hybridization between two technologies. Of course, renewable generation, but in a two ways combination, which is a maximization of the use of common infrastructures, switchyards, transmission line, and enabling what I call virtual storage by saving water for hydropower generation during daylight, for example, and using at night when solar PV not generating. A second one, in addition to the storage, battery storage mentioned, is seems to me very important to recall that storage does not only rely on batteries, but also on pumping storage, which will have also an important role to play, especially for daily or long duration storage.
What do you find is really an avenue for growth for Meridian?
Actually, we are quite agnostic to technology because the issue for us, and to fall back on I do believe in storage, but storage can come from multiple technology. I mean, at the moment, we're building hydrogen storage fueled by PV in French Guiana, but it's because there is a capacity market that is actually worth it. The same thing in other French islands with STEPS, which is hydraulic storage, where you pump the water and you put it back when it's time. The capacity market is quite important. So the regulatory framework and the market actually drives which technology thrives faster.
Speaking about energy transition, Valerie, EDF has committed to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. What are the key steps, key priorities to deliver on that agenda?
For 2030, our reduction is by 50% for our direct emissions, and 28% for our indirect emissions. So meaning we are not only decreasing our own emissions, for our direct emissions, for example, it's linked to the closure of all our coal stations in France and in the UK by the end of 2022 and by 2030 in China. But it's very important also to notice that there are also the indirect emissions linked to our clients, moving from gas boiler to heat pump, or generally better regulation pushing for more usage of electricity, where electricity become more and more decarbonated.
For you, Valerie and Daniel, who have this worldwide exposure to the energy market, any idea about how in the next decade we are going to start meeting this objective of phasing out coal?
So for us, the challenge is both about pricing correctly the externalities, notably health issues linked to coal production, but also ensuring that the energy transition does not leave people behind. And it will be also the case in some part of Africa, like South Africa, where we know all that coal is a major part of the generation mix. For example, what we do to be part of this energy transmission, of course, is to deliver highly competitive renewable production and low carbon generation more broadly. For example, in India, where there is also a coal issue. EDF has 1.6 gigawatt of renewable in portfolio, and also we'll bring our nuclear experience with Jaitapur project. So there is no one solution. There are many technologies solutions, as we said previously, and what is important is to bring on the table all the possible solutions that can fit appropriately the local condition.
I agree very much with Valerie. I think it's very difficult to convince countries in which maybe financial resources are not as available as in other places to close plants which are up and running and are cheap. Investing today in new power for new demand clearly goes to renewable, but replacing things that are up and running is a real challenge. And I think it needs international effort and financing schemes, and somehow to help them, promote that replacement. And it's not an easy task, to be very honest.
So speaking about impact and engagement with local community, any experience you may want to share, Daniel or Thierry, of projects where you have been facing challenges, how you have addressed it, and what may have been your takeaway?
I think the issues are mainly in two areas. So one is the land, how that land is used at the moment we want to do the project, or that may be, it can be a sacred land, or there could be, limitations for use, and people and neighborhoods are normally extremely sensitive to those things. And second is the economic impact that investment will bring to the community. So I think it's extremely important to really engage very early with the communities, to be very transparent, to be there physically, to visit them and to try to promote, a conversation and dialogue.
And Thierry, if I may tease you a bit, Daniel has told us what to do, how to approach it. On the other hand, what not to do, or what difficult experience you may have had on your end, Thierry?
The use of land is usually the source of the issue. So the dialogue should identify really, and it's less a question of compensation rather than what can you do to help the community develop further or sort of recover any sort of economic loss, but also many other things. So it is an intense dialogue that takes a long time, and one should really take the time, because there's no other way and be able to almost contractualize, and we actually try to do so all the time, all the commitment and support. And it's not a short-term support, it's something that goes a long way and has to survive with the project and the many years.
We'll have to start wrapping up. Let me check whether there is any follow-up questions or any objections you would like to address to each other on what you heard.
I actually had one, because both Valerie and Daniel were very shy of saying how do you replace coal, but Valerie should be saying that nuclear is a perfect transition energy.
I said it.
But I think one thing that there is today a way to price these externalities, which is the price of carbon. It's just that the market doesn't function, and there is no consensus at all the state levels and the countries level to actually give it a signal. But the moment that the pricing of the ton of CO2 is actually got a real signal on the long term, believe me, coal will be very quickly out of the game. There are carbon markets in Europe, in the US, in everywhere, but it's sort of a bit of the elephant in the room to accelerate this transition that we should talk about a bit more, I think.
Maybe my question to both of my colleagues here, who have much more extensive experience in Africa probably than we have. To be honest, we have had troubles in Africa. No? So it's maybe if they can give us an advice, especially on something that Valerie said before, no? on timing, how to deal with the lengthy processes of decision making, and how to really be patient, on how to make things move.
A good advice is to build trust. And that's true for projects with communities, but that's also true with government. So, and building trust is an initial period where you breathe at their rhythm, and maybe after that you can accelerate the rhythm together. But it takes the time, but you need to invest in this time. It's not something you can skip.
Yeah. Of course, I can only say the same. Maybe just to add that this trust is also linked to your presence on the field and in the country. Those countries you cannot develop from far, or it's very difficult to develop from far. They need your presence, because building the trust is also doing a lot of pedagogy. And pedagogy, the art of pedagogy is repeating and repeating and repeating. And for that, you need to be present, and you will not lose your time. Losing your time is gaining a lot of time for the future. And that's how it is in Africa.
Thank you so much, Valérie, Daniel, and Thierry, for joining us for this session of the Sustainability Exchange and bringing your experience as well as one of your company on these topics. Thanks so much.
Some great insights on energy and climate issues. Rosa, I'm interested in your view.
What it was extremely important from that message that we have heard is that communities, local people that are being impacted by these projects and these developments need to be involved. They need to have a voice in everything that is impacting their lives.
I couldn't agree more, Rosa.
And speaking of local voices, we actually have artists to check in with. We appreciate their voices and how they remind us of what matters. Let's check it out.
So, is it fun, dance?
No, yeah.
Make up like this one.
After that, then you paste it. So choosing the bright colors, it shows concerning the market, the variety of the concepts, and the bright material.
Lo más difícil del mural han sido los tiempos en los que estamos desarrollando, la cuarentena, la pandemia y todo lo demás. Y pues en este momento también estamos en uno de los paros más grandes de los últimos años.
Bertrand, I think one interesting angle is now we have this growing concept now of this social license to operate, and my perception is that applies both to private companies as well as state-owned companies. So in your perception, I guess your answer already alluded to that. Do you believe this is really the way that any utility think of? You mentioned that some of the utilities used to think a lot inwards, and now I guess we have to face that the customers and the communities, they are really the ones that are responsible for the sustainability of our business. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's also what is. I mean, we are a global operator, and what we see is that both the emergence of middle classes in any city of the world, being in India, in Africa, also the social medias, where you are constantly connected and you have the information circulating, makes that being public, private or state-owned enterprise, we are all facing the same challenges of dealing with this issue of engaging with the population as a whole. What we observe everywhere we operate in the world, I mean in Africa, in Asia, is that in all cities you have the emergence of a very strong middle class asking for good services, and you have also the combination of the social medias everywhere where any issue is immediately reported, and therefore being public, private, state-owned, I mean any water, wastewater utility or even energy utility have to deal exactly in the same way with the expectation of the population. I used to say in Argentina when we were renegotiating the contract that it would cost 0.1% of Argentina GDP to solve the water and wastewater problems of 15 million inhabitants, which was at that time half of the population. 0.1 during 10 years. So you see, so if there is a will, there is a way, and I think that the move that Brazil is doing is a very good one, and will attract a lot of actors to make sure those services are developed and the population can have access to the services. How do you consider innovation in your company?
We are developing partnerships with many universities in the south of Brazil. So we have a program for that, which is Univertec Corsã. And we are getting closer to partners such as IFC, for instance, which is helping us in the non-revenue water challenge, in the improvement of the electricity efficiency in our operations. What we are seeing is a growing number now of extreme events such as droughts or floods. So, for instance, this year and last year in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, where Corsã is located, we had severe droughts, and we were very close to rationing. So, thank God we managed to avoid that. But we are targeting, among others, the reduction on non-revenue waters. So we have in Corsã about 43% of non-revenue waters. That's too high, so we have the intention to reduce it sharply. And we are in this partnership with IFC, targeting that. And then we also working, again, with the cooperation of IFC in a plan for water security. So we are mapping all the sources of water we have down here, and making sure that we use these resources the best way as possible, because clearly I see these climate events becoming, unfortunately, more and more frequent.
Being private company, winning our jobs on bids, we need to differentiate ourselves. I mean, being a good water treatment company, good distributor of water is not enough to win a contract now. So we have to bring in a lot of externalities, and therefore everything which is around the mitigation of climate change. It's a very large scope of work with reducing the energy consumption, producing biogas from wastewater treatment plant sludges and so on, producing energy from water circulation and so on. So that there is a lot done there, and also there is a big chapter on adaptation to increase the resilience of the water and wastewater systems.
I'll borrow a phrase from a French national, which is nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. No, so this is Victor Hugo, and I like very much that phrase, because I really believe in what we're doing, what we're trying to do, no? And that's what really energizes myself and my team here in order to move forward. And I believe that's a key element when you have huge challenges such as the ones we're seeing in this sector in Brazil right now.
So, Pep, we've been talking a lot about water, the community side, but also the business side, the urgency. What's your view?
I mean, water is basic, right? It's a basic human right, from childhood health to COVID, basic sanitation, hand washing, to climate change, where countries that haven't had water issues are now facing water starvation and drought. In most rural areas of El Salvador, we still have little girls go to the rivers, collect water, take it home, boil it for survival, right? So I think, as I say, water is life. It is a human right.
Okay, so now it's time for you to pick your very own urban adventure. For the next 18 minutes, you'll get the opportunity to hear different perspectives from the public and private sector on cities and urban solutions.
Exciting. You know, I absolutely love adventures. I'm choosing the first one, digital and community-friendly cities. I'm excited to hear more on public sector challenges, smart solutions, and successes from mayors and infrastructure leaders across Europe and Asia. Where are you going, Michelle?
I'm going to head to adventure number 2 to learn how entrepreneurs are solving urban mobility challenges through digital tech. I'm excited to hear and learn more about how Thomas and Laddie are building urban solutions. So now, to choose your own adventure, you have to click on one of the 2 buttons below. Make sure you click play to start the video. We will be back in about 18 minutes for our finale with Rajiv Shah, head of the Rockefeller Foundation, and the grand reveal of our global art. So don't worry if you don't get to finish your adventure, totally fine, you can come back to it after.
Олон улсын санхүүгийн байгууллагаас зохион байгуулж байгаа энэ арга хэмжээ бол одоо бас зөв зүйтэй бас арга хэмжээ мөн гэдэг төл би бол огт хэрэгэлцэхгүй байгаа. Ялангуяа улс орнуудын доктортой хөгжлийн бодлого гэдэг бол ер нь туйлын чухал. Доктортой хөгжлийн одоо бодлогын ардтал, доктортой засаглал, доктортой эдийн засгийн бодлого, доктортой нийгмийн бодлого гэдэг хүний амьдралын бүх одоо хэм хэмжээ бол ер нь доктортой байж удаан хугацаанд ер нь бол үр ашиг өгдөг. Тэгэхээр хувь хүн өөрөө юу хүсэж байгаа, юуг зорж байгаа, одоо ирээдүйн байгууллагын төлөө ажиллах энэ чанар нь тэр хүний итгэл сэтгэлээс бол угаасаа ундарч чаддаг гэж би хэлхийг хүсэж
Та
байна.
спортод жолон улс төр зэгч ингээд аль алинд маш гайхалтай амжилтад гарсан юм түүхтэй. Тэгээд яаж юм өөр салбарт тууштай амжилтанд хүрээд байна вэ? Тэгээд хой хүний онцлогтон тань бас байна уу? Аль алинд нь маягтай харж байна.
Би ч одоо бас нэг бага наснаас эхлээд спортын гэр бүлд одоо бас өссөн. Манай аав бол өөрөө тээврийн салбарт бол олон жил ажилласан нэг л даруй хүн байдаг. Биднийг баг багт бол ерөөсөө л нэг тийм эр хүний тулхтай, тууштай, зарчимтай байх, зорьсон юмныхаа төлөөд одоо говьж дайвахгүйгээр эцсийг үзэж одоо ард нь гарахыг л их зөвлөдөг байсан. Тэгээд би ч одоо нэг эмээгийнхэн гар дээр одоо хүн болж боожж байсан. Тэр Монгол их хүний ухаан, хүн хоорондын харилцаа, хүнтэй хүнд, настай хүнтэй хүндэтгэлтэй харьц тэр одоо жишээ нь Монгол ёсыг алдаж болохгүй. Энэ нөгөө нэг тийм амьдралын хэв маяг гэдэг нь өөрөө ёс суртахууныг бий болгож байгаа. Монгол ахуй хүмүүжлэр л хүмүүжсэн байгаа. Тэгээ энэ маань өөрөө нөгөө спортын хүмүүжлд маш их нөлөөлөл үзүүлсэн. За тэгээд нөгөө зорилгыг бас тодорхой болгож өгсөн. Энэ суур чанарууд л одоо миний энэ яваад байгаа бас амжилтанд нөлөөлж байгаа л да. Энийг би нөлөөлж байгаа гэж ойлгож байна. Гол нь зорилго тэр дотор хүн дотор юу бүрлдэж байгаа гэдэг чинь л их чухал юм байна. Хамт олныг өдөрднө гэдэг бол амаргүй. Ер нь хүн хоорондын харилцаа их чухал байдаг гэж боддог. Хүн хоорондын харилцаан дээрээс үүдээд хүн хоорондын ойлголцол бий болдог. хүн хоорондын ойлголцоор суурлаад цаашлаад тэр итгэлцэл дээр одоо суурлаж цаашдаа энэ улс орны ажилч бай, хувийн бизнесийн ажилч бай, өрх гэрийн ажлууд явдаг. Хүний итгэлийг алдна гэдэг бол 1 секунд, хүний итгэлийг олно гэдэг бол асар их хугацаа шаарддаг. Итгэлцлийг бий болгоход бол тэр тухайн хүнээс их шалтгаална. Хамт олондоо хүлээн зөвшөөрөгднө гэдэг бас нэг асуудал байна. Тэгэхээр тэр бол нөгөө хүний хөдөлмөр юм байна. Нийгмийн одоо энэ доктортой хөгжил, улс орны доктортой хөгжлийн бодлого гэдэг бол хувь хүний л одоо суур хүмүүжлэлтэй л одоо салшгүй холбоотой.
Дараагийн асуулт маань бол яг ухаалаг технологитой ухаалаг тээвэр гэдэг сүүл үед нэлээд яригдж шүү дээ. Тэгвэл Улаанбаатар хотод одоо төлөвлөж байгаа болон хийгдэж байгаа ямар ухаалаг шийдлүүд байна та хуваалцаж болох уу?
Дэлхийн нийтийн чиг хандлага бол ер нь мэдээллийн одоо технологиор суурилсан ийм хөгжлийн бодлого концепцуд явж байгаа. Энэ дэлхийн одоо чиг хандлагатай бодлоготой үе уралдаж одоо хөл нийлүүлж одоо алхахыг бол одоо эрхэм болгож байгаа. Улаанбаатар хотод бол ялангуяа энэ мэдээллийн одоо технологиор суурилсан нэг тарих нэгдсэн систем гэдэг төслийн хүрээг хэрэгжүүлэхээр бид нар мөрийн хөтөлбөртөөч оруулсан. Тэгээ энэ хүрээнд бид нар бол энэ нэг тарих нэгдсэн систем төслийн хүрээнд бол энэ цахилгаан хангамжийн асуудал, орон сууц нийтийн аж ахуйн чиглэлээр бол энэ ус цахилгааныг одоо хэмнэлтийн горонд нь оруулах, тэрийг хянах, нэгдсэн системд оруулах, зам тээврийн хөдөлгөөний удирдлагыг одоо шинжлэх, орчин үеийн шийдэлтэйгээр одоо энэ Сөүл болон Бээжин дэлхийн том хотуудад хэрэгжилж байгаа энэ технологийн шийдлийг хэрэглэх энэ одоо ажлууд бол яг эд дундаа явж байгаа. Тэгээ өнөөдөр Улаанбаатар хотод бараг 650 орчим мянган тээврийн хэрэгслүүд бүртгэлтэй байгаа. Авто зогсоолыг одоо жишээ нь олон улсын төвшөнд төрсэн байдлаар нь зогсоол хийх. Тэгээ ер нь цахилгаан автобусны хэрэглээг бид нар бол хийхэд тулд улаан хангамж цахилгаан станцуудынхаа өргөтгөлийн ажлыг бол засгийн газрын төвшөнд яралтай явуулах ийм чиглэлийг Монгол улсын ерөнхий сайд бол одоо өгсөн. Одоо бид нар Улаанбаатар хотод бол нийт тээврийн шинжилгээр 1000 автобус гэсэн одоо төсөөлтөй явж байгаа. Тооцоололтой явж байгаа. 1000 автобус 5000 такси гэж. Энэ автомашинууд, энэ нийтийн тээврийн хэрэгслүүд бол ер нь 50% нь одоо цахилгаанаар, 50% нь одоо агаар орчин, байгаль орчинд одоо бохирдол одоо баг одоо тийм гаргадгаараа хийн түвшээр одоо ажиллах зохицуултаар хийхээр. Тэгэхээр бид нар нөгөө эрчим хүчнийхээ одоо эвхүүсрүүд дээр нэмэлт одоо өргөтгөл хийж ээж Улаанбаатар хотын одоо нийтийн тээвэр дээр хэрэглэх бидний нэвтрүүлэх гээд байгаа байгаль орчин дээлтэй одоо хотын одоо энэ агаар орчны бохирдол одоо сөрөг нөлөө үзүүлдэг ногоон эко гэдэг энэ юу зон руу бүс рүү орсон их айл одоо болгохын төлөө зорж ажиллаж байна да.
Ингээд цагаараа занслаад маш баярлалаа шүү.
За баярлалаа. Амжилт хүсье.
Artık internetsiz yaşayamıyoruz. Ekmek su gibi bir ihtiyaç haline geldi. Bu arada 918 tane köyümüz var. Tümüne internet götürdük. Orada da yaptığımız incelemelerde 15.000 kadar öğrencinin eğitim hakkından mahrum kalmamasını sağladık. Dolayısıyla hem imkanı olmayanlar için hem de fiziki olarak imkanı olmayanlar için internet hakkı tanıyarak onların da eşit eğitim hakkından yararlanmalarını sağladık. Bu konuda da Türkiye'de bir ilk yaptık. Bazı belediyelerde bunu aynen sürdürüyorlar. Bu arada örneğin elektriği kesik olup da kullanamayan yoksul aileleri de tespit ettik. Onların da elektrik ücretlerini ödemek suretiyle internetten yararlanmalarını sağlıyoruz. Şu anda yine Ankara'da 27 meydanda ücretsiz internet var. Bunları da kendilerine vatandaşın duyuruyoruz. Onlar da arzu ederlerse o meydanlardan ücretsiz internet hakkından yararlanabiliyorlar. Şu anda bütün dünyadaki yükselen trend bilişim çağı. Yani bilişimde ne kadar öne çıkabilirseniz, bilişimdeki meydana gelen yenilikleri Ankara'nın sanayisinde, ekonomisinde bunların kullanılmasını sağlayabilirseniz Ankara'nın kalkınması da o derece hızlı olacak. Çünkü bu dijital dönemi bütün firmaların yapması lazım. Öncelikli olarak dolayısıyla biz de internetten yaptığımız bütün harcamaları, ihaleleri yayınlamak suretiyle, canlı yayınlamak suretiyle insanların öncelikle harcadıkları paraların nerede nerelere gittiğini, nasıl ihale yapıldığını, kaç firmanın bu ihaleye girdiğini görmelerini istiyoruz. Bu yolla da çok büyük tasarruf sağladık Ankara'da. Ve Ankara halkı da takip ediyor. Bir ihalemizi 400 bin kişi canlı olarak izledi. Daha sonra bazı belediyeler de bizi örnek aldılar. Bu anlamda ayrıca dijital dönüşüm ofisleri, gençlerin kendini ifade edebilecekleri teknokent benzeri kuruluşları da Ankara'da hızlı bir şekilde hayata geçiriyoruz. Bir tane Kuzey Yıldızı'nda, bir tane Çankaya'da, bir tane Dikmen'de şu anda hemen hemen kullanıma hazır hale geldi. Bu gençler kendi yaptıkları çalışmaları aynı zamanda da iş dünyasıyla birleştirebilirlerse sanıyorum Ankara çağı yakalamış olacak. Bunu geliştiriyoruz. Şimdi anketler yapmak suretiyle vatandaşa söz hakkı verip yine onlardan aldığımız parayı harcarken nereye harcayacağımızı onların öncelikli taleplerini öğrenerek tam bir e-demokrasi, yerel demokrasi örneğini ortaya çıkarmak istiyoruz. Bundan büyük keyif alıyoruz. Çünkü Ankara önceki yıllarda böyle hayali projelere çok paralar yatırdı ve bunlar battı. Yani şu anda işlevsiz hale geldi. Biz vatandaştan aldığımız paranın onların ihtiyacı doğrultusunda harcanması için elimizden geleni, dolayısıyla yerel yönetim, yerelden yönetimin güçlendirilmesi ancak vatandaşın yönetime katılmasıyla olur. Vatandaşın yönetime katılması için de bu tür başkent mobil gibi uygulamaları sürekli olarak geliştirerek Ankara'da hayatın her anlamında bize ulaşmak, şikayet, talepler anlamında yerleştirmeye çalışıyoruz. Biz bize gelen şikayetlerden yaptığımız bütün harcamaları belediyenin web sayfasından yayınlıyoruz. Yani kişisel verileri koruma yasasına aykırı olmayan bütün verileri paylaşıyoruz. Vatandaş görsün Ankara'da insanlar neden şikayet ediyor ya da neden memnun oluyorlar. Bir de biraz önce söylediğim gibi paraları nereye harcıyoruz? Bunları görmeleri lazım. Düzenli şekilde internetten bunu yayınlıyoruz. Dolayısıyla bu konuda da hatta Uluslararası Şeffaflık Ödülünü de aldık. Tabii ki bu Ankara başkent. Dolayısıyla diğer...
So I'm Patrick Avato. I'm the upstream lead for infrastructure in the ECA region for IFC. First, I'm actually in my kids' playroom right now.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Philip Keller. I'm co-heading actually with Dagmar Vogel this infrastructure financing section of the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, focusing on infrastructure. Yeah, family-wise, I have 3 kids. They are not at school, so I had to organize that they're not in here because it wouldn't be that quiet. I wanted to touch on 3 areas on where technology can influence urban mobility and give in the 3 areas some examples. The 3 areas would be greater efficiency through database decisions. The second one, web-based stakeholder engagement. And the third one, apps that improve the attractiveness of public transport. Urban mobility in general, I mean, it's essential because it connects us from everything, no? From job to jobs, I mean, from home to jobs, to schools, to universities, to hospitals, but also for leisure, to sport, meeting friends, family. So it's really an essential part of our life. Now, on the first one, the database decisions in Ukraine, there was a city, actually, one city in Ukraine planned new bike routes, and through actually the overlap of data from accidents with these planned bike routes, one could identify dangerous areas and through that actually reorient those bike routes and improve the routing and make them safer. So also here, through better data, better decision and better services, safer services. The second area I wanted to outline is actually better stakeholder engagement through web-based processes. Now, typically stakeholder engagement was done with stakeholder workshops, so people were called together and what would discuss on issues, not only of course urban mobility, but also others. But now I think with web-based solutions and processes, you can interact in a much wider sense and actually integrate, I mean, time-wise over a longer period, but also reach out to many more people. And this, of course, can be used, for example, for planning of new or adapting of existing routes by involving a huge range of stakeholders. But another area could also be to generally give feedbacks of public from customers to public services, and then as a result of it being a basis to improve public services. And the third area is the improved attractiveness of public transport through apps. Here, I can mainly talk as a frequent user of the Swiss transport system, which I think is fairly good. And one app which connects all public transport from intercity trains to urban railway, but also trams, buses, but even boats. So you have an app where all this is integrated, so you can really say from where to where you want to travel, and it gives you different options. How do you go from A to B? Give you options for that. You can choose, but not only you can choose then, and give you a timetable from how long you need and where you need to change transport means, but you also can then directly buy tickets on this app. So this, in my opinion, increases the attractiveness and ease of public transport a lot.
An app like that is what we would have needed in another Ukrainian city that we work with together with Seiko in Mariupol, in the very east of the country, where we have redesigned the routes of the public transport system to better meet the needs of the populations. But we didn't have such an app. So we did get some data from mobile phone companies, anonymized to get that.
Okay.
But we had to pay students to count people on buses, both formal and informal. Right. So I think it's a great example that you're making of how smart solutions can make these things so much easier.
You know, I understand that Almaty is thinking of its program as a city as a platform where you are, finding new ways and creating new ways of unlocking opportunities for businesses. Could you tell us a little bit more about this concept?
Oh, yeah, with great pleasure. The kind of vision and the solution which we created here in Almaty City, which shows a very good way for the development, especially for smart mobility. The basic understanding is like we're starting to track all the mobile users, depersonified. We started to develop a new data integration models where we see not only, as I said, depersonified, we see not only where the people are going and heading, but we see at the certain time where they are. And we see how much money they're spending, and we see how much money they're earning in the certain districts in the city. And we see, thanks to the economical classifier which we developed through the tax department, we see on what kind of business they are spending money and what kind of business, from what kind of business they're earning money. The next way is based on providing very good solution for all the city, where we're starting to develop the new model, which is called City Without Borders or City Without Walls. It means that 100 steps availability is going to be very important, and wherever you are in the city, whenever you are at a certain time, you will be able to get the 90% of all your demand, of all the services you need in 100 steps of availability. And you don't need to go to the center of the city. Why? Because we see that thanks to the urbanization, it's going to be a very big problem, not only for Almaty City, but for Manila, for all the biggest Southeast Asian and Asian cities. It's not very convenient, and it's not well balanced when we see that at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning, we see that all the city is coming to the one center of the city and it becoming more overheated when we will be able to provide a certain business, invite investors in the certain districts all over the city. It means that it become more efficient.
There's a lot to be said for bringing services to the people and bringing it to where they are, as opposed to, having everybody cluster in certain places, creating congestion and a whole host of other issues. I think it's really exciting to hear what you're up to.
One of the most important things here in Almaty City, I think it's not only in Almaty City and all over the world, that we need to understand how we will involve our citizens to the problem of the city. So it's not only us as a city government are going to face that kind of problems, but we need to understand how citizens will be able to help us, because, as I said, competence, professionals, and creative people are coming from the business and coming from the ground. It seems that we as a city government are not the most smart here in Almaty City. And here we see that when we will be able to provide the data, when we will be able to shows the kind of instruction of using this data and proof that this data is real and we didn't draw it by ourselves. It means that people will be able to use this data to create that kind of certain algorithms. If they will be able to provide a good solution and a good answer for it, it means that it brings a lot of help to the city as well.
There's really only one battle scar that has really kind of had what I would argue to be the most defining effect on my career and really my life, and that's when I kind of look back at the beginning of my career. I definitely spent way too much of my time and my effort in the early stages focusing on kind of using my entrepreneurial skills to generate economic value primarily, i.e. money, as opposed to using those skills to solve a problem. And I would argue that if indeed I could have that same time machine again, the one thing I would definitely have done is started this wonderful journey of using entrepreneurship to solve problems a lot earlier than I did. And I would say that the period of time I spent kind of focusing on economic value creation rather than societal change, positive societal change, is the biggest scar I most probably have. It was a complete waste of time and something I wish I didn't spend so much time doing relative to the fun that and impact that I'm having now. At Move here, the problem we're solving is really access to vehicles, primarily vehicle ownership. Our vision here at Move is to democratize car ownership across sub-Saharan Africa to start with, and hopefully scale that across emerging markets. And when you think about mobility on the continent, and you think about urbanization primarily on the continent today, Africa is, as many people know, one of the fastest growing populations in the world. By 2050, nearly 2 billion people on the continent, the majority of whom will be in urban cities or urban areas. But unfortunately, as a continent, we're not building the public infrastructure, public transportation infrastructure to move people and goods around those kind of urban areas. So by virtue of that, mobility in and of itself, when one starts to think about e-mobility and ride-hailing, it's critical to fill that gap. But as with most things, unfortunately, on the continent, there's a problem. And the problem is when you think about car ownership, or when you think about the marketplaces that are created, the digital marketplaces that are created in that ride-hailing space, they're broken here on the continent. So, Tomas, what urban mobility problem is your company solving?
Here in Tembisi, it's really about the last mile. So if you take the big cities in Latam, 70% of all rides are up to 5 miles. So the problem is, do we need a car to commute up to 5 miles, or can we do in a more efficient way? And that's exactly the problem we're trying to solve. We are trying to give people other ways to commute in these short rides, but that represents a lot in the total amount of rides that we have in our cities. So when you look for this, you say, okay, if I will commute 3 up to 5 miles, can I commute in a more efficient way, in a more sustainable way, in a more affordable way than a car? And that's exactly the problem we're trying to solve, and the solution that we're trying to give for our citizens here in Latam. And that's pretty much offering bikes and bike sharing systems so people can jump off from a metro or a bus station and take a bike to do the last mile. And of course, with this, you avoid gas emissions. It's much more affordable for people, and the investment for the local municipality, it's zero, because we have a private business model where everything is paid by advertising, sponsorship, or users. We are using our bikes as a tool for couriers to work. So the delivery guys and the delivery companies, we partner with them so they can take the bike to do the food delivery, especially. And it's really affordable for people, and it's increasing a lot, especially on the pandemic. So with like $1, the guy can take a bike and use to work to do the deliveries. So we are increasing a lot this kind of let's say new business here as well, and also it's a way to people they can work on the gig economy with the bikes.
Yeah, I think that's super smart. It's extremely smart. I think one thing that I've started to learn whilst building Move and solving our part of the urban mobility problem is how many kind of birds you're killing with one stone, right? And what I mean by that is moving goods and people around in an effective and cost-efficient manner helps the economy, and by virtue of that we can start to develop, and we can develop in a fashion and a speed that we need to. But then secondly, you're also creating jobs. And that, when you look at Africa, for instance, that's critical. Everybody knows that we're an extremely young continent. Everybody talks about our kind of our youthful bulge. But in reality, and I've said this on certain occasions, certain times before, that's also a big threat to us here in Africa. Because if we don't create enough jobs and we don't do so fast enough, that will lead to crisis. And urban mobility in and of itself, it's one of those unique opportunities where you're solving a major problem and building an economy, and then you're also at the same time creating jobs. And that's just like you mentioned in respect to the bikes, right? Your additional revenue, additional income, but you're also ferrying people back and forth to work in a cost-effective manner. It's very powerful, extremely powerful.
Why does MTR exist as a company? When we were founded in the late 1970s, people didn't think of setting the MTR up to make money. They thought about setting the MTR up to keep Hong Kong moving, because at that time it was just incredibly difficult to get around the cities. And so our new corporate purpose statement is to keep Hong Kong moving, and given our global business, to keep cities moving. And so I think the way that we can build trust is by fulfilling our purpose of keeping cities moving. So we do have incredibly high public transport usage here in Hong Kong. It's over 90% of trips are taken on public transport, and about half of that 90% are taken on the MTR. And I think one of our first real innovations was the Octopus card, which is the stored value card that people can use to travel on all public transport in Hong Kong, and can also use for relatively low value transactions in convenience stores, 7-Elevens and the like. And I think the genius behind the Octopus card was that when it was set up, a new company was set up that was invested in by all of the public transport companies. And so this was a project that we could all commit to, and it meant it had wide usage right across the city. So on buses, on trams, MTR and ferries. And I think that was really the key to Octopus's success. I think, and we tend to look at innovation at MTR from a number of different perspectives. And I think if you're talking about what's enhanced our popularity, it would really be the customer-facing innovation. So one new app that we've developed recently is called Carbon Wallet. And this was an app that it was actually a lot of our youngsters, our young graduate engineers, worked to develop. And this is a carbon savings tracker that then is linked to a green rewards program. And it's very cute. It's available to download on the App Store. And the idea is that there is information provided on the app, so it can direct our customers as to how they can get to a recycling station, where their closest recycling station might be. And then through taking actions like recycling plastic bottles, as we move forward, like travelling on the MTR, like monitoring the number of steps they're taking every day, it can then link to a rewards program with accredited green suppliers and restaurants and the like. And so this was something that we just launched recently, and we're really excited about it because we feel it's something that's quite fun. It was great to engage our younger staff, but it will also help kind of nudge the behaviour of our passengers. And what we find is there's innovations here in Hong Kong that we can share with our operations around the globe, but equally there are innovations that they are producing that they can share back with us. And so in Melbourne, for example, where we have a much broader network which is above ground, we've been using their drone technology to inspect our assets. And in the UK, we've been exploring how we can use CCTV differently, and again trying to combine different technologies to monitor passenger behaviours on platforms. So it may be to monitor crowding, it could be to monitor antisocial behaviour, or it could be to monitor, if we think passengers are going to take action perhaps to injure or try and harm themselves, so that we can try and intervene before they take those steps. So lots for us to learn and lots for us to share within the MTR family. So we're always looking for new technology solutions to challenges that we have, to issues or risks that we can see as a company, and often working either ourselves or in partnership with suppliers to try and develop some of these clever solutions.
I would love to start with just a nugget of a story about your distinguished career. You've been in the Singapore Armed Services, and you were the chief of the Republic of the Singapore Navy. Can you tell us, what have you learned as a Navy admiral that you use in your new role of leading the global smart city business of ST Engineering?
I've served my country and served in the Navy for over 25 years. But what I think you probably didn't know is that after my career in the Navy, I actually went on to serve in the government. The two agencies that I actually served, one was actually called Public Utilities Board, and the other one is Land Transport Authority. In Public Utilities Board is the National Water Agency for Singapore, and the responsibility is really to oversee the planning, design, implementation, and the operations of the entire water system for Singapore. And you know Singapore is a fairly water scarce country. In Land Transport Authority, it was actually responsible for the design, development, and implementation, as well as the operations of the entire land transport system, essentially the public transport system in Singapore. Agencies has given me tremendous experience of seeing how we are able to provide for the running of an efficient, smart, and ultimately a more sustainable city.
How you view the importance and impact of integrating the digital and the physical infrastructure together at city scale. Where is Singapore in this process?
For the citizens, complexities of operations within a city can now be easily and more readily abstracted to very simple application on your phone, right? Whether it's about utilities management, whether it's about prompting the city council intervention or embarking on, say, seamless public transport journey. So I think technology and digitalization really does change the way you actually connect the city. So that's one appropriate aspect. Now, in terms of, I think, resilience, the digitalization has brought about, again, proliferation of sensors, artificial intelligence, and data measurement and analytics platforms, which gives you new benefits of seeing how we can actually enhance security. And in fact, simple, humble, and say ubiquitous lampposts actually can be wired to serve as a city sentinel, helping to monitor traffic, even threats and environmental changes. So that digitalization is bringing about a whole new level of resilience that I've not seen before. But I think the part that really excites me is that digitalization is also bringing on essentially new ways in which you can make the city more sustainable. Utility systems are basically now being retrofitted with sensors so that they can bring them to net zero outcomes. So power grids are getting more intelligent, allow you to inject renewable energy. Water grids are smarter water grids are actually helping to reduce network leakage. And in buildings, we see on-demand lighting, air conditioning, waste management, all allowing for, I think, more optimal matching of services and also supply to demand.
And so I'd love to know what you think about smart mobility solutions, and which ones do you think have the most positive impact on the quality of life and well-being, especially for Singapore?
In my mind, I must say, in the realm of smart mobility, I don't think there's one particular solution that has just changed, I think, better quality of life. It's really, to me, I think, a combination of a few key things. We are seeing a combination coming forward. A combination first comprising of very robust and efficient public transport backbone, And when I say backbone, it basically means extensive rail and bus network that serves the entire city. So that's one aspect of the combination. The other aspect of the combination is that with that, we're also seeing introduction of more ubiquitous first and last mile options, which then gets integrated with what is, I would say, the third leg of now the increasing application of mobility as a service, where at the touch of a button, you can essentially plan, book, pay, and execute seamless end-to-end journey that is safe, that's reliable and comfortable. And most importantly, at a fraction of the cost of owning a private transport in the city.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your question here.
When things go wrong with urban technology, it's usually not about the technology, it's about the business model. And what that really means is that there's nothing essential about ride-hailing technology or the ability to reserve a hotel room or a bed in somebody's house, or even inherently wrong with facial recognition technology. What the problem is when the way they're used, usually by the private sector, implies a power grab or a way to get around existing rules and regulations, or ignores the side effects of that business model. And whether that's the impact that you might have on the housing market, whether that's the impact you might have on traffic, whether that's the impact you might have on a parallel regulated operator, right? Those things are not about the technology. They are about the profit motive and the way that the company has designed its business model. The good news is that in most cases, those business models are changeable. They may or may not be exactly the business that the investors invested in or that the founder wants to have. But again, those technologies are not the same as the business models. And so a good partnership between a city and a technology provider is one in which the city has to bring flexibility to the table, but the private sector partner, also has to bring flexibility to the table in the way they are going to make their profits and how much they're going to make and in what kind of rights they want to have. Another issue there is often what they assume will happen to the data that might get collected, which from the private sector's point of view could be a gold mine and we don't know what it's worth, so we're going to keep it all. From the public sector's point of view, either that shouldn't be collected or that's probably public information that needs to be shared freely. And again, that's a business model question. It's about understandings. It's not actually about the technology itself.
Welcome back. So Shaza, I wonder what you thought. I saw you smiling.
It was wonderful and enlightening. Services 100 meters from my house. I love it.
So you're going to have to move to Almaty for that.
Will you come with me?
All right, we're all moving to Almaty. And while we plan for that, we have another surprise for you. So stay tuned and maybe get ready to stretch.
Yeah, the time keeps ticking. Life's mad short, so we gotta keep living. Hey, hey, so turn it up. Hey, hey, don't never stop. Bring the party, bring the fun, bring the juice. All the haters, all the players, cut them loose. It's time to shine, best believe. Yeah, it's time to shine, yes indeed. Grab my girls, now let's roll. We're turning up, yeah, it's time to go. Where the party at? Gonna bring some soul. Yeah, we hit 'em with the good stuff, the good stuff. Grab my team, that's how we roll. We touch the sky, we take control. We bring the love, yeah, we bring the soul. Yeah, we hit 'em with the good stuff, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, when the party at, the good stuff, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, when the party at. Yeah, when the party at, the good stuff, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, when the party at.
I wanted to start asking you a question that actually has nothing to do with the energy in Africa, but more as you as an individual and how you grew up and what did you want to be when you were a kid?
You know, I probably dreamed of wanting to be a sports star, and I grew up in Detroit, but wasn't good enough to play for the Detroit Tigers. When I went through school, I became an economics major and studied at the London School of Economics because I always wanted to tackle with the underlying economist question. And at the same time, I always wanted to be a doctor. And so partly because I couldn't make up my mind, I ended up doing both. And it's been a great ride.
How was it growing in the US, and is it something that you want to talk a little bit about?
I grew up in an Indian immigrant household. And so when you're in that position, you always sort of wonder, well, do I really belong here? And am I fully accepted as who I am? In many ways, while the racial reckoning and the discussions about diversity inclusion that we're having today in American society are unfortunate because they accompany these tragic events like the murder of George Floyd that elicits such emotion and anger as it should. The flip side of that is it's really good to be part of a society that's grappling with these questions in a more transparent way.
The foundation has announced a very bold call to action with unprecedented partnerships to provide sustainable energy to 1 billion people by 2030. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
So we made the pledge that now is a time for bold action. We went to the capital markets last year and raised significant debt resources for the first time in our century plus history. We have used those resources to make $1 billion commitment to a global green recovery. And the signature element of that is investing in inclusive energy infrastructure to make sure that everyone can be part of a modern global digital economy. We think the technology exists now to do that in a primarily renewable way. We think the solutions are on-grid and off-grid and integrated and holistic. And we have seen in nation after nation where we work, the power of bringing reliable power. And that has to be a major driving part of the global recovery. So that's why we made this pledge right now. It's why we're excited about collaborating with you and the IFC. And we think there has to be a real urgency around it. What gives you hope that we can kind of end energy poverty, but also build out this infrastructure in a way that is quick and impactful?
Going forward, it's going to be a sort of a leapfrogging to different approaches. And I'm not also I would say a dreamer who thinks that tomorrow in Africa everybody's going to have their own individual solar panel to do their needs. I mean, there will be a need for grid. There will be a need for stable grid, including using the mix of energies that they have today. But when you go forward, you really have to look at how do you make sure that you make progress on both agendas of giving access to an energy at an affordable price, at an affordable way, and making sure that you are progressing on the renewable energy front. It was interesting that you picked that topic of renewable energy, and so is there a particular reason why you picked that sector or compared to some others that some other foundations might be working on?
We see that that's an area where it's ripe for global transformation. We know that there are 1 billion people that live effectively without access to productive power that need access to that electricity in order to join the modern economy. So that is about access and inclusion. We know that the alternative is just more big coal plants connected to grid systems. And the world is building 500 gigawatts of coal right now, 100 some gigawatts financed in developing countries. So, that's not the right path forward from the perspective of protecting our shared commons, our planet and our globe and our environment. And we know that, frankly, crisis and crisis recovery, I saw this time and again when I served in the Obama administration, crisis and crisis recovery is when you have the opportunity to go big. It's when you have the opportunity to get other people to see what's happened and make sure it never happens again. And that's just going to require a level of resilience in our infrastructure and a level of commitment to inclusive infrastructure that we haven't seen in the past. I think trust is absolutely essential to building inclusive infrastructure and doing it at a time when many nations are struggling deeply with the long reality of the COVID-19 crisis. And this should be an area where governments and private sector leaders are able to come together and say, we believe in our people and we are going to make tangible, observable investments that will help them lift themselves up so they can be stronger and more resilient to future crises. It's the moment of trust, and it's the moment of lift, and it's the moment of leadership that really matters. And I want to thank the IFC and others for standing for that value in the context of the global recovery.
Thank you for inviting me to close this day. I wish we could see each other face to face and make new connections. But the energy and enthusiasm of the exchanges that we see today more than make up for not meeting in person. This past year has been difficult for many of us, and many of the people in our client countries are still facing difficult times with challenges of the dual crisis of the pandemic and climate change. Despite this incredibly difficult period, the crisis also offers opportunities to build back better and differently. We're seeing innovation and renewed ambition to tackle challenges of the dual crisis. The challenges of the planet, people, and the economy are interlinked, and therefore an integrated response is needed. We need to set a clear path for green, resilient, and inclusive recovery and growth. What does this mean? It means leadership at all levels and a whole of government and a whole of economy approach to chart a roadmap for green and sustainable recovery and growth, one that creates jobs, growth, achieves climate objectives, and reduces the digital divide. It must also mean a growth path that is resilient and inclusive by ensuring shared prosperity and by taking a whole of society approach. This requires creating room for local voices and grassroots solutions, many of which we've heard about today. We need to listen and learn from each other's realities to create a shared vision for the future. Collectively, we face a moment to reset from the past, and we look forward to working with all of you to realize a common future which is green, resilient, and inclusive.
Transformar es generar un cambio.
Darle otra forma. Transformar es mejorar algo.
Así mismo nosotros como personas.
August 16 on this, yeah. Ay, ay, yeah. Ay, ay, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Mari, and all of our brilliant speakers. It's been wonderful to spend this time with you. The concept of time poverty was raised today, and we are so grateful that you choose to spend your precious time with us. It is a treat for me to be here, back with Taniqua and Michelle for our final farewell.
And I have to say again, it was so good hearing from all of the amazing youth voices. Also, it's amazing how the global art really came together across 3 continents. Thank you to the artists in Ghana, Mongolia, and Colombia who created such inspiring and lasting visuals.
Completely agree, Taniqua. Yes, and thanks to you, the audience. And really, look at all the fun that we've had together. We networked at the beach.
We co-created a tree where you responded to how you build trust.
We visited other countries in the virtual reality gallery.
And we heard from your voices through the intimate breakouts, chat, and social media.
And now we want to hear from you again. Please complete the survey and let us know what you thought. We always welcome your feedback.
And you are welcome to visit this platform for a few more days to experience anything you missed. Please share the event with your friends and colleagues so that they can experience it too.
We've loved having you with us. And of course, these are much longer relationships, and we appreciate just having this one moment. Over the last year, and indeed even sometimes over the last couple of hours, we've experienced so many ups and downs, and our long-standing collaboration with all of you really gives us hope and keeps us moving forward. It inspires us to harness the power of trust and technology to deliver on the global development challenges ahead. And as Raj said so poignantly, now is the moment of lift. So thank you, take care of each other, and stay well. Knowledge go make you better. Hey, knowledge you give each other one. We dey hustle every hour. But knowledge are the power.